And we are live. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 3 of the Hall of Fame series as part of the Wake Up podcast. On this episode, we are talking about atheism. So I've entitled it Bitcoin Atheists, and I've got obviously the world-renowned Bitcoin atheist, Knut, on the call. He's an author of a couple of books. I'll let him tell us what books we're doing. And then on the other side, I've got Ben, BTC Sessions, full-time Bitcoin education YouTuber and whatever else he wants to say there. So I'll let you boys introduce each other. Well, sorry, introduce yourselves, not each other, and then we'll go from there.
Cool.
Knut, you first.
All right. Yeah, so I wrote two books on Bitcoin, Sovereignty Through Mathematics and Independence Reimagined. And my latest work in Bitcoin is a little video clip on YouTube called Bitcoin Everything There Is Divided by 21 Million, which is based of one of my articles from this eminent magazine over here, Citadel 21. So I try to put my thoughts out there every once in a while.
Mm-hmm. And I must say that everything divided by 21 million is one of my favorite memes now. It's a very underappreciated meme because I think I used it in, actually not I think I did use it in my Pleasure Pain article, where I discuss how Bitcoin's adoption curve is a function of necessity, and when it gets to full saturation, full adoption, that is when Bitcoin's value is, the opposite of zero, which is everything divided by 21 million. So I think it's such a beautiful, beautiful concept. Ben, over to you, man. Tell the audience a little about you, man.
Yeah. So I've been doing an educational YouTube channel called BTC Sessions since 2016, a couple of years after I started into Bitcoin, and have been doing it ever since. So I pretty much cover all the stuff that newcomers might be asking. How do I get a wallet? How do I secure my Bitcoin? How do I do coin join, run a node, all that kind of stuff. And then like yourself now, I do interviews and panels and fun things like that to pump out even more content as we get deeper down the rabbit hole. So yeah, it's been a lot of fun, and I've been able to work with a ton of different Bitcoiners over the years. So happy to be here, man.
Thank you, man. Thank you for actually piping up when I put that. It's funny, when I put that question out there, like I had a barrage of like an army of atheists and agnostics being like, down with the church. Fucking, I'll come on your podcast. It's like, oh, Jesus Christ. All right, let's take it step by step. So then, I did a quick bit of research, and I was glad because we've connected before. We were discussing this earlier at Riga, and I think, yeah, there's going to be a great discussion. There was a million people that we could have done it with, but I think I really, the background for each of you, and we were kind of discussing this earlier, is, you're a little bit more like me, Ben, where we sort of grew up religious and kind of came out of that, whereas it's a little bit different. And I think we're going to have a really, really important conversation here around some of these themes. So without further ado, because I can sit here and frame this up, for hours, but let's just get stuck into definitions. So I want to go into each of our stories first about how we sort of became atheist or agnostic or whatever position we're in at the moment. But before we do that, let's throw around some definitions. And Ben, since you're on screen, let's go with you first. First definition, and the way we'll do this is we'll go definition, and then we'll sort of throw it around. And then we'll go the next one, throw it around, and we'll keep going like that and see where we get to. So first one is God. What in your mind is, how do you define God?
How do you define God? I mean,
the meaning of life, Ben. I want it now.
yeah. When I think of God, I think of some deity like figure, either in the sky or kind of. When I grew up, it was God is everything and everywhere and is part of us, but is also kind of this detached deity that we can refer to, and who guides our lives and pulls the strings behind the scenes, or always has our back, but basically a deferral of responsibility to a higher power that is somehow looking over us or has a master plan. That's kind of what I grew up being taught, I suppose, in some way, shape, or form. But yeah, I'll leave it out of that.
Okay. Well, so on that, did that definition evolve for you, like in terms of how you perceive that word or that, you know, that entity now, or is it sort of still influenced by that sort of early perception of what it was?
I think it's kind of morphed over time. Like when you're, so I grew up again in I will say a transitioning Catholic family. My grandmother was very, very religious, and you know, took my father to church every Sunday, and even on the other side of the family, on my mom's side, they still went to church and everything. So, but then as I was a kid, you know, I went to Catholic school, and as a kid, you can't really grasp all of that. So you get the typical stories of the gray bearded man in the sky, who looks over all of us. But then as you kind of get a little bit older, and again, I went to Catholic school all the way through high school. So the definition becomes a little bit more less centric on a singular being, and more kind of like this ether that, or this something that kind of flows through everything in existence and is the collective of all of the universe, while also being, again, a deity figure that you can actually talk and pray to. So it I don't know, that the definition almost became more obtuse as I grew older. And I think maybe that contributed to my my separation from my religion. Yeah. And my disillusionment. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Sweet. Okay, awesome. There's a couple threads I want to pull on there, but I'll throw it over to Knut quickly to hear what he thinks.
My definition of God.
Yeah.
I think the word God is a collective name for a flaw in primate thinking, that there's some sort of omnipotent being or creator, like stemming from our own ability to create things. We think that there's a necessity for something or someone having created us, and it's sort of a celestial dictator or big brother figure that hinders us from realizing that we are in charge of our own lives, and we can dictate our own destinies to a much larger extent than if we believe that we're like supervised or like surveyed by some deity dictating what morals standards we should have or whatever. I also think that this flawed thinking has been used by a plethora of despots and war leaders across history. But we've been fooling people ever since we invented ceremonial burial, that there's an afterlife. And when you can fool people that there's an afterlife or a higher cause or whatever, you can make them do atrocious things to other human beings. And I think this is a very dangerous thing, and I'm totally against it, and happy to argue against the dogmatic thinking of religious people.
It's actually particularly the part that you mentioned about trading, like sacrificing life for an afterlife. That was actually one of the early things that took me out of, you know, believing in any form of religion, or, you know, that sort of transformed me into an atheist, because I found it ridiculous to think that we have life now and we'll go ahead and sacrifice it for some ethereal promise that somebody kind of made up. So that I think is a really powerful point. So that brings me to my next piece then is and I'll throw this one out there, is how do you define then religion? Do you separate religion and God? Like, are they different things in your mind, or do you sort of place them together? Or
do you want me to jump in first?
Yeah, sure. May as well take turns. Let's go for it.
Religion, I think it encompasses the idea of a deity. If you don't have kind of that deity figure, I don't consider it religion. I consider it a form of governance, perhaps, and I do view religion as a way of governing a people in some way, shape, or form. But yeah, I consider religion to be like a set of morals or rules, regardless of merit, centered around a story of a higher being that set forth the rules of the universe, or set forth a standard through which people must follow. Of course, I believe that standard was actually written by people and then used to manipulate. But yeah, I consider religion more or less just kind of like it's been used as a moral compass over the years in some good and some bad ways when it comes to outcome. But yeah, more or less just a way to live your life.
Okay. Knut, on your side?
Yeah, religion is a difficult term to define, but because I think you can view it as a thing that includes more things than just a belief in a deity or a creator or an omnipotent being. I view states as religions as well nowadays, and even like cheering for this and that soccer team or a football team or whatever, that could also be a religion in a way. And I think it's a form of dangerous groupthink, like people thinking things because other people think things. There's always dangerous to not start from the individual, but to me, religion is a negative term.
Yeah, it's interesting. So back to the way I personally, my personal journey was renouncing religion first, and being undecided about the notion of God. So I kind of thought that, hey, maybe there is something out there, but the idea of a religion, which I've always viewed, again, in both your lenses, Ben, I think I like the way you sort of said that. I always used to call religion just a set of rules, and those rules were written by someone who was someone's interpretation of, I guess, values, morals, and principles that somebody else may have said are a good way to live. And then over time, we followed these sets of rules, not because they made sense, but because somebody else did. Kind of like what you just said, Knut, is like, we're doing things because somebody else did them. And that's sort of the height of ignorance and stupidity, right? Is that you don't know why you're doing something, you're just doing it because somebody else is doing it. And that's, I mean, it's almost like we have 2020 has been, the most religious year, I think, in history. Is people wearing masks because someone else is, people fucking taking tests. It's like, it's preposterous. Like, the level of stupidity is it's almost as if we are back in the medieval ages today with the sort of way we're behaving.
It's scary.
Yeah. So I think, yeah, for me, I've always had a much larger problem with religion than, or particularly the older I've gotten, than I have with God per se. But yeah, okay. So that's that one. Hold on, let me just make sure I'm on the right track here, because I had them listed in a particular order. So what about spirituality? how do we, Ben, we'll go to you first. So how do do you give a shit? Do you think that's just another word for religion or God, or is it, because I know you got these days, especially with the modern people, I'm not religious, I'm spiritual, so where are you on that camp?
It's honestly, to me, I mean, there's, you hear the term spirituality a lot within religion, within Catholicism, Christianity, whatever, whatever religion you're referring to. But you also hear it a lot from kind of what you alluded to prior, which was also kind of my path of, well, I don't believe in this particular religion, and I don't purport to be well informed enough, or I wouldn't assume if any religion was correct to be able to decipher the correct one, because there's so many different religions out there, and everybody's so convicted for no reason whatsoever that theirs is the one. So I kind of fell down that path too, of disavowing religion, but initially being, well, maybe there's something. And I think the term spirituality has the meaning of it has shifted towards that uncertainty, but still wanting to hang on to the idea of, but there's still a cloud man looking after me. So I get a lot of, the people that now when I hear the term spirituality today, I typically think of somebody who has like some shiny rocks sitting on, like lit up, or like in some sort of a shrine to the universe, and that like uses essential oils to direct the flow of their life, or reads the secret. So like that's kind of my current assessment of the term spirituality. But previously, like if you go back like 2 decades, that's not what comes to mind. So it's shifting.
Chimpanzees have been observed doing exactly that. On a side note,
it's like the politically correct version of being religious, right? It's like, I don't want to say which one I am, but let's just pray to the rocks. And
well, because if you're spiritual, you're not a bigot.
Yeah, apparently. Yeah, that's right. You're a nice person.
You're all inclusive.
I think I have a slightly different definition.
Good.
First of all, I don't believe there are spirits of any kind, except for liquor. But spirituality, I can. Some things you do in life feels like you're channeling a greater force than your own, like the conscious part of your brain. You can do stuff unconsciously, and that can really feel like you're channeling something else. And I think a lot of religiosity stems from that. Like sometimes when I play music, or when I write something, or when I have really fantastically good sex, it feels like someone else is doing it and not me. I'm just experiencing the thing. I'm in the now. I'm totally in the now.
In a way, the fantastically good sex, someone else is doing it.
Yeah.
Anyways, continue. Sorry.
Unless we're talking about porn, all right? But anyway.
Yeah. I've had fantastically good sex by myself as well. But anyway, I think that is a feature of the human brain that had some evolutionary advantage at one time. If you were like what surfers call in the green zone or whatever, that you could have a really good flow when you're doing something, when you were like riling up your tribe, or when you were hunting down a tiger, or whatever you were doing back in the Stone Ages, like there was probably a evolutionary perk to that. Otherwise we wouldn't have it.
Do you think that evolutionary perk is not valuable anymore? Do you think we've transcended that, or do you think
no? I think I don't think we transcend evolution. I think evolution
Okay.
is so much more influential and bigger than we all believe. I think all these thoughts about like stopping evolution and getting above it, and like even the thoughts about entropy that you talked about with Breedlove and Gigi, and like stopping entropy, I believe that's hubris in a way, because I don't
Yes.
believe humans are that important to the universe. I think we're ants crawling on a rock, and
Very big rock at that. Yeah.
yeah. Well, depends on the scale. Quite a small rock.
I mean, metaphorically speaking, in the sense that, you know, we are so tiny on the evolutionary timescale that, you know, we are ants walking on an extremely big rock. So not necessarily referring to the Earth, but metaphorically speaking.
Yeah. So spirituality, I do believe there are some. You can have a better life if you get to know your own brain better, including your subconscious and deep parts of it. So I do believe in like meditating and getting to know yourself, and really try to focus on how getting a thought into your head feels, and what consciousness is, and that there's nothing there except for the thoughts that come in at random in your head, and you don't really control them. I don't really know if I believe in free will or not, but I like the quote, "Of course we have free will, we have no choice but to have it," because there's no point in acting as if there's no such thing as free will, because that ends all discussions, and that's the way I look at metaphysical phenomena as well. I don't believe that they're worth discussing, because they're by definition outside of our understanding. So I don't think there's a point to discuss things that we can't understand, or that are known to be unknowable, because there's plenty enough that you actually can know and actually can figure out more about. So yes.
Interesting. That kind of ties into the next one, which I want to ask, which goes a little bit deeper and it's a little more sticky, is consciousness. You know, since we're on the theme of defining things, and Ben, before I throw this to you, because Knut sort of touched on this point, maybe I'll get Knut to sort of kick this one off with, you know, consciousness is a thing. How do you define that? You know, what does consciousness mean to you on an individual level, but also on a you know, collective or a more super individual level?
Yeah, that's a real tricky one. I mean, there are no good definitions of consciousness. The best one there is I think, therefore I am, which is slowly turning into I stack, therefore I am, but or I hodl, but therefore I am. But there's no there. I mean, all we have is our own consciousness. That's like what we experience with our senses is everything. That there is nothing more than that. And but like studying that is hard, because there's nothing to anchor it to. So I guess I think we have more to learn from just accepting that we are conscious, and the other human beings around us are probably conscious too, and we should probably act as if they are, and most animals as well, because if we don't, and it turns out that they are conscious too, we might make very bad moral decisions. And I think, on a side note there, I think morals preceded religions by far.
Of course, I mean, religions were a derivative of you know, morality.
And sort of screwed them up. But I think their moral behavior has evolutionary perks, definitely, especially for a flock. There's some stuff in my first book about this, about how like in an army of ants or bacteria, the it's better for the entire flock or the entire army if it's full of yes sayers and people that are, or entities that are willing to die for the higher cause. But if you can somehow sneak in there and act as an a-sayer, but in truth be a naysayer and like not join the battle when the stuff happens, then you have a higher chance of surviving from a personal perspective, which in part explains why there are so many psychopaths in leadership positions. Did that make any sense?
It did. Actually, there's so many threads I want to pull on there, but I don't want to get too bogged down here. So there's a couple of things I'll touch on. So I think the morality piece is really important. I'm writing my, it's probably going to be, it's not my magnum opus, but it's going to be my longest article to date, which is for the New Bitcoin Times. And there's a section I was literally writing just before we jumped on this, which talks about how, evolutionarily speaking, humans are sort of like, we are part of the experiment that is life, and life is this sort of bigger flow that is, that is moving forward. And life is this messy process. We're not bigger than life. Life is an evolutionary process where for every 10 things that happen, maybe 8 things fail and 2 things succeed. And then from those 2 things, another 10 things, come out. And we still don't know yet whether we are destined to be sort of, a failed experiment, because, we have the arrogance and ignorance to think that we can go outside of, or contrary to the bounds, or contrary to the flow of nature and life, right? And I would, with that sort of thought in mind, is like, if we've got over time, nature and life is this free flowing, set of experiments that occur within the broad bounds of some, immutable, immovable laws, things like, gravity, energy, time, the speed of light, etc. Right? So you've got this sort of messy thing that happens in between. Now, what I think nature does over time is it creates these grooves in existence, which we could decipher as morals or principles or Lindy compatible methods of living, which makes sense. And that's what I would argue morals are, is morals aren't some, thing that's handed down by somebody that this is how you should live. Morals are a functional way for life to continue, because it is sort of compatible with, evolutionary progress. So, private property is one of those things where people think, oh, it's a man-made construct, where I would argue it's actually it's a biological evolutionary reality, is that all of nature operates on the basis of territory. And you remove that, you actually operate against nature. That's why something like communism or collectivism doesn't fundamentally work, because it moves against the grain of what nature is. So
I have so much here.
Fuck. Okay. Okay. Go hit a couple points. Hit a couple points, because I could go on for ages, and then Ben, we will get to your part. But let's
no worries.
Let's hit a couple points.
Yeah, morals, like to me, the point I make quite a lot is that we have 2 ways of extracting value from each other, and so have animals, by the way, and that's speech and violence. When you boil it down, you can either be violent to the other person, or you can cooperate with the other person, and you can't do that without a language of some kind. In order to cooperate, you need to communicate with the other being, and that's where I think morals stem from, because it is evolutionary speaking, it's better for the entire species if we have more collaboration and less violence.
Yes.
And hopefully this is the point where this is the direction we're going in, on a very large time scale, like more cooperation and less violence. Of course, in some situations, in a lot of situations, it's better to be aggressive and violent, evolutionary speaking. But I think a lot of humanity's success as compared to other species is because we're more prone to collaboration and less prone to violence. And this is what has driven us forward, and that's why we're on top of the food chain, so to speak. That we have another option than violence, and it's easier for us because we can express ourselves better than other species, and we can adapt to other people's thoughts, and we can adapt to stories. We can get intersubjective stories resonating within our collective mindset, and we can nation states and religions have been forces that have for humanity on a whole, they've helped us become the dominant species of the earth. The question is, are they good for the individual or not? And I think we need a better set of intersubjective fantasy than the old ones, like religions and states, and we should find another way of looking at stuff. And I think Bitcoin is that thing. That's what we are doing now, discussing this thing. We're finding the new paradigm and the new way of thinking about things, and a new way of approaching morality that excludes a lot more violence than any other mindset that preceded Bitcoin.
I think, yes. So, I mean, you could even argue that a big part of why that happens is because, and this is really well discussed in The Sovereign Individual, is this idea that the incentives for violence change when you decrease the cost of defense and you increase the cost of attack. And that, so
exactly.
Bitcoin by definition does that. So then it kind of, shuffles, it kind of like, because you can't fight evolution, but I guess in some senses, evolution or life has its own flow. And if you sort of align with that, and one of the alignments for evolution is, can you optimize the process via which we collaborate into something that is more cooperative in nature, versus more, call it top-down authoritative in nature, and that's exactly what the Bitcoin experiment is.
Yep.
But okay, Ben, let me throw it to you, because then I really want to dig into this consciousness one. But let's get you, unless you've got anything you want to add to that little ramble that we hit then.
So, I mean, I think it all kind of ties in together, actually. So maybe I'll go the consciousness route and then tie into what you guys were talking about in regards to collaboration. So, I mean, again, as Knut said, it's kind of hard to define consciousness. For me, it's on the individual level, perhaps gaining an understanding of the truth of what's around you. And that can iterate over time. And in a group situation, again, that consciousness, it can be, if it's done effectively, it's understanding the merits of ideas and understanding the world in which you're in, to be an effective participant and not come about your own demise almost. And so in regards to what you guys were talking about in terms of ways of collaboration, and I think that kind of comes from consciousness, we've kind of been going through this shift of ways of organizing and collaborating amongst ourselves. And so, again, we saw that initially, and like in The Sovereign Individual, they talk about religion as being a way to organize. So there was a guy named Emil Durkheim, I believe, and he was one of the kind of like early founders of the idea of sociology, around the late 1800s. And so he kind of had three main purposes of religion itself. And he said one was social cohesion through shared rituals and beliefs. He said another was social control to enforce religious-based morals and norms. And then he said it also offered meaning and purpose to answer any existential questions. So things that unknowable things that people just didn't understand. They needed a way to wrap their heads around them. And I think that we're kind of shifting ways to meet some of those needs, or shift what those needs even are. And so we started with religion, and then gradually over time, as things became a little bit more based in reality, or we're able to scientifically answer more questions, the pull of the church gradually diminished, and then we moved to the nation state as kind of our primary way of organizing. Then from there, what I think we're seeing now is we're kind of seeing yet another shift to where we're actually able to, rather than dealing with dogmatic teachings, which can be very coercive and easily corruptible, to the nation state where we're in right now, where it's a bit more democratically determined. But again, those that are kind of representatives that are elected, they can also be corrupted. And we're now moving into a state of consciousness, or a way of organizing, that is a meritocracy. It's opt-in, and it kind of is like social and economic Darwinism, where the people with the most merit, the people that are perhaps most conscious, will make the best decisions and thus flourish into the future. And so we've moved from dogma to democracy to hopefully now meritocracy, through higher consciousness.
Okay, interesting. That I was going to save this for later, but that almost reminds me a little bit of, I mentioned Don Beck and Claire Graves to you guys earlier. So this idea of spiral dynamics, I think you'll both really, really like their work. And I'm actually writing a piece called, and I just don't have the time these days, fucking hell, but I'll get to it at some point. I'll finish it, is Bitcoin through the lens of spiral dynamics. And he expands on that notion where you sort of said just then, dogma to democracy to more conscious meritocracy, in a sense, as a way we as human beings have evolved. But Claire Graves kind of goes a little bit deeper, in the sense that he starts with this level one called the beige level, or sort of the basic infantile level, where everything, it's completely 100% egocentric. It's me, and I am who I am. And you don't sort of recognize anything outside of you. And then we sort of evolved as humans to sort of the next level. And we all started infantile anyway when we're born, because we don't really even recognize anything outside of us. I think it's till after 2 or 3 years, or whatever the case is. So we sort of evolved to this sort of tribalism, which is, he calls it the purple level, which is it's kind of like the way you can probably think about it is early tribes in Africa who, if the lightning struck here and all of a sudden someone died over there, they would sort of connect those two events as, the god of lightning didn't want them alive. And, we sort of created all these, gods from rocks and weather and all this sort of stuff. So we had no concept of anything, but we created these tribes, and we were sort of, interconnected with these tribes. And then we evolved out of that. And, the forcing function of evolution beyond that was violence in some sense, which we move into the red layer, which is the power god, which is kind of, you see that it can be exemplified by the rise of the Egyptian pharaohs, for example, or early warlords, who then realized that they could have power and influence over these tribes, or someone within the tribe rose through some sort of violence or dictate to sort of say what has to be done and when. And that was sort of, the next evolutionary, I guess, shift in values. Because all if we look at all of human evolution, it's just a shift in values, or it's a evolution in how the values framework through which we operate evolves or adapts. And so red was that next stage, and I mean, we still have people who are red today. Like, you look at rapists, or killers, or even like really good sports players So like they sort of they operate in red. So then we evolved to blue, which blue was the introduction of structure and order and process and system. And you see that kind of energy really come up with the rise of the church, or the rise of policing or government or the nation state, etc. And then that sort of brought us to the next stage. And then, orange was the stage after that, which is scientific or evolutionary in nature, or it questions everything. It's commercial in nature, it's entrepreneurial in nature. And that was sort of, what one could argue was the rise of America, was effectively, the rise of the orange, level of this spiral. And then, you got green after that, which is again coming back from, more call it ego or individual centric, back to sort of collective in a sense. But it's the idea that, we're all one, we're, all connected, we're in touch with the environment and with the planet and all this sort of stuff. It's more of a consciousness version. And then, that sort of, it's kind of exemplified by, your I shouldn't say Gandhi, but like, I don't know, maybe a Mother Teresa or something like that, right? And but then I don't know. I don't think many people are true, green in that sense. I think there's a lot of fake SJWs who kind of find the values framework in the green level of the spiral dynamics, but they try and assume they can ascend to that without having experienced all of the other levels, which is one of the most important elements of this work, is that it says you cannot just ascribe yourself to a particular level. It's something that you need to integrate all the elements within you to become a whole human being. And then sort of the spiral dynamics sort of finishes up with the yellow level and the turquoise. And yellow is the recognition. So it's kind of transcends each of the levels, and it recognizes that no one level is right. It's the essence or the energy that is embodied by the level, or and the values framework that comes with it, that's important. And using that contextually is what matters. So, there's no point in being green when the house is fucking burning down. You better get in red and throw a chair out the window and get out of there, because if you're all kind of like, oh, it's all about all of us, you're going to burn to death. So it's so yellow is sort of the recognition of that, and then turquoise is, some sort of transcendent, like fucking Buddha level. So anyway, it's a really interesting idea, but it kind of it's a good lens through which to view consciousness and the evolution of humanity and consciousness. And my argument in the book, in the article that I'm writing, is Bitcoin is finally our emergence into yellow. It's our emergence through the stack. It's okay. I knew I kind of had a feeling you were going to say that, because so orange is, again, it's an important element. And it's funny, the more I've become radicalized in 2020, the more I hate the fucking green. But I realize that that's something I also need to adopt, and that because I'm very personally orange. Like if I use that framework as a lens through which to view myself, because I'm entrepreneurial by nature. Like I'm a rule breaker by nature. And that is sort of where my center of gravity is. And that's important to understand, but it's also important to acknowledge that each of the other elements, and I guess this is the libertarian in me, are important. And I guess libertarianism is also like, it's the yellow embodied as well, because it is about the freedom to be at all those levels, and the recognition that, that there's values, frameworks within each of them that are extremely important. I really want to dig into a little bit more on consciousness, but I know I've just rambled, so I'll throw this out to you guys for a little bit. Just any thoughts and ideas on this model of thinking?
Well, I think you have to read the book first, to be honest.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
it's really good.
It seems
it's really good.
It seems, again, like I won't try to repeat exactly what levels and colors represent what. Also, I'm colorblind as fuck, so let's not go there. But but besides the fact, every kind of level seems to, like you said, they're all important, and they all contribute to that highest level of consciousness, of thinking, of organizing. And yes, you know, your example of if the house is burning down, you've got to not think about everybody else, but throw a chair through the window and get the hell out. I mean, that in the end, that does contribute to and preserve some of that consciousness, and then come back into the fray to contribute to the group level and like the greater good for everybody kind of consciousness that comes from that, and the absolute truth that kind of transcendent consciousness achieves. So in a way, like all of those little data points from those lower levels come together in that top level of consciousness.
It's sorry, you go first, Knut.
Here's another word that we need to sort of define, and that's truth, because absolute truth and like higher truth, I don't really believe. I believe that it's kind of binary. Either something is true or it isn't. I don't believe that there's a like metaphorical truth. I don't buy into that at all. I think you can find, if you look for them, you can find metaphorical truths in everything.
In everything, yeah. That's and that's a slippery slope into moral relativism.
Yeah,
which is,
yes, and moral relativism. That's a dangerous and dangerous route to go down. And this is why this is what I have against Jordan Peterson when he's on a slippery slope there when he talks about the definitions. Did you hear the debate about the definition of truth between him and Sam Harris? It's
no, but I don't like Sam Harris. I think he's a fucking phony fraud.
He used to be a good thinker, but I think lately he's become so much like anti-Trump and all these things. So it's like that has like taken over his thought process. But he was really good in the beginning. He wrote a book about lying that I can really recommend. And speaking of Mother Teresa, I can also recommend Missionary Position by Christopher Hitchens about how evil that old bitch was. Really, yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So okay, couple things there. So I think I'll tie off the spiral dynamics idea with just one final thing. Is one of the elements that I like about it is that it doesn't discount either the reality of the individual or the reality of the collective. So again, I'm an individualist first, and I really believe that the path to a strong collection of human beings is through strong individuals. So you optimize for the individual, you emerge with a strong collective. But if you try and homogenize the individuals and remove what's real and try and replace it with optimizing for a fucking disembodied collective, it's the path to tyranny and death and all that sort of stuff. But what I like about spiral dynamics is it recognizes that there is a yin yang or a spectrum or an interplay between both sides of this, right? So you do have the individual, and if you look at the levels, that they kind of go between each other, right? So beige is individual, purple is tribal, collective, then red is me again, blue is group, orange is individual, green is group, then yellow sort of transcends that, and then turquoise, the idea of that is like a connectedness to one and all. But that brings me, before we go and define truth, because I think that's an important thing to define, is consciousness as a thing. So we all kind of defined it here, or to some degree, but what is it and why does it exist? Because we seem to be unique, at least as far as we know, unique in our consciousness, in the sense that we are conscious of not only our birth, our death, but we're also conscious of our consciousness. So like, is this quote unquote God? Is this the unknown that is the immeasurable or the irregular in?
I'm not convinced that we're unique in this. I think we have a very hard. It's very hard to know what another species thinks and how it operates. We cannot know if a blue whale is aware of its own consciousness, for instance. There's no way of knowing that. And I think it's sort of a dangerous, arrogant path to go down, like thinking that we're unique in this sense, and that it's so special. I think it's easier to examine the world if you don't put too much weight on consciousness itself as a concept, because it's sort of a dead end. It turns out to be circular arguments about it all the time, and you can't really get anywhere from it. On a side note, I think we should really define the word atheism at some point here, because
Okay.
yeah,
I'll add those two to the list then. Ben?
I was just gonna tag on to that. Again, I'm not super convinced that we are unique in a sense. I think we're on a spectrum. I think that it's just the fact that we were just high enough up on that spectrum that we were able to ascend to the dominant species on the planet. But we could have others that are not far off on the evolutionary scale, and when we boil it down to saying like, well, we're the highest form of consciousness on the planet, therefore we can do whatever the hell we want, or get into that line of thinking, then any higher form of thinking that happens to come along Earth at any point in the future, morally speaking, then they should be able to do whatever the hell they want, because we're a lower form of life.
Yeah, I have a thought that really ties into this really good, because it's in my second book as well, and it's about Dunbar's number. And as far as primates are concerned, we're the only primate that can organize in bigger groups than Dunbar's number. You know about Dunbar's number, right? It's like about 150 individuals.
About 150. But yeah, I don't think we can.
No, I'm getting to that.
We can't though. Okay.
I'm getting to that. Like flocks of chimpanzees and baboons and such, they never exceed 150 individuals, because everyone, that's the highest number where everyone can know everyone. So you can really have a extended family, or whatever you may call it. But our intersubjective fantasies or ways of organizing, like religions and nation states, are attempts at organizing larger organizations than these 150 individuals. And that's I believe that this is like corporations and states and whatever that try to exceed this and try to cooperate on bigger levels, that they're doomed to fail. And like the most successful companies in the world, the biggest ones, they don't have that many employees. They are franchises, and they outsource a lot of things to other units within Dunbar's number. And like the Coca-Cola company, for instance, I don't know if this is correct anymore, but I heard that at one point in time they had 9 employees across the globe. The entire Coca-Cola company was made out of 9 people, which is weird when you hear it, but it makes perfect sense if you realize that Coca-Cola is just selling a name and nothing else. Have nothing to do with the software.
I'd be surprised if that's true these days, because I think there's in the world we live in, there's efficiencies in vertically integrating the operation. But look, my first piece that I wrote about Bitcoin, like my first long piece, was actually literally centered around this idea of Dunbar's number and how we as a species. So that piece was called I think it was Homo sapiens, evolution, money, and Bitcoin. So it kind of looked at Bitcoin as, I opened it up as saying, our journey toward Bitcoin started 70,000 years ago, because sort of Homo sapiens have been around for about 150, 200,000 odd years from what we can tell. And it was around 70,000 years ago that something seemed to have like switched or shifted, or something happened that and enabled us to really start to accelerate away from all the other species. And we killed off all the competing species in the process. And that advantage seemed to lie in our ability to create these abstractions for cooperation that allowed us to exceed Dunbar's number on the surface level. So we were able to create complexity, or we were able to introduce greater complexity into the way we collaborated through our unique, call it, consciousness that allows us to to coexist, or that allows intersubjective reality to exist. Now, I would sort of go further, and so to touch on Ben's point earlier about the slippery slope that is, I guess, evolutionary authoritarianism, let's call it that, which is, I am more conscious than thou, so therefore you should come under my boot, is dangerous. But I would almost argue that, or I don't know if it's an argument, but it's maybe an observation that our consciousness, may have evolved as part of, like, because yes, blue whales we can't know the consciousness of blue whales, but we can probably say with some high degree of confidence that it's completely different to the consciousness of a human being, because they don't have the same body or the same
not
stuff
completely
as
different.
Us. Like,
I think there are similarities. That they commit suicide, for instance. I think you have to be conscious to do that. That's a conscious decision to commit suicide, and so blue whales do that. And where do you draw the line, like in humans? Like there used to be many species of human, like a Neanderthal, for instance, were quite different than us, but quite alike genetically. Do they have a different type of consciousness? And like our DNA are like 98% similar to the DNA of a dog, and like there are similarities between us and other species, and I think that it's sort of arrogant to think that we're unique in that way, in that sense. Does a gorilla have a consciousness, for instance? We have no way of knowing what a gorilla thinks, even, and it's very hard to think. Since we can, and the difference there, I think language is a very, very important thing here, because language seems to be, well, as complicated a language as humans have seem to be unique to us. If you compare it to like bird song or like just barking or whatever, grunts. I mean, we have complex language, and that's a necessity in order for intersubjectivity to work, and for us to organize above, or at least superficially, as you said, above Dunbar's number. So I think language has language might be what separates us from other species.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think that, again, the ability to communicate across generations and communicate across large geographical
time and space,
it allows us to, the technology of being able to communicate so well across those chasms allows us to operate above and beyond Dunbar's number, while still being restrained by those limitations. And again, it kind of has, I think, obviously contributed to the methods of organization. Like as those efficiencies of communication get better, you start with sacred texts that dictate and are passed down over time to dictate how people live their lives. And now it's currently more the majority of society is kind of like it moves faster in that we tackle issues and discuss them via mediums like this, and through that people form opinions and then vote on what their representative should enact. But I think we're going further beyond that into, again, opt-in software that is meritocracy based. And I think we can actually kind of see the people that don't realize this shift have very real consequences of not understanding what kind of a system we're leaning towards. So like perfect example is Roger Ver to me. Because he mistook Bitcoin for being the two formers. First, he took the white paper as a sacred text, a religion, and that if it deviated from that, then it was no longer Bitcoin. Then he went down the democracy route of, you know what, we're going to democratically leave and people will vote with their feet and they'll come to my idea because my idea is better. But it turns out he's in a fucking meritocracy, and in not realizing so, had very real economic consequences and reputational consequences for that.
Beautifully put. And to end this, well, like Bitcoin is in a way the ultimate linguistic tool. It's a compute, because before Bitcoin we had gold and stuff like that could store value or communicate value over time, and we had money that could communicate value over space. But Bitcoin can do both, and that's that's a whole new level of operating. Like
the aggregate data points that can come together to show that meritocracy in real time are incredible. We've never had that before.
It's going to propel us forward so fast when it becomes more mainstream and more like used by people who can really, by entrepreneurs. I think.
Yeah, I think that transcendent nature is extremely important, but I'm still not satisfied.
Wait a minute, transcendent?
Well,
there's some meaning... phrases. Yeah, some phrases here I disagree with. I hear a lot like
Okay.
It's still within the realm of reality, so it's not really transcendent, is it?
Transcendent for me means moving beyond a paradigm. Like I use it in the functional sense of the word, is that, you know, to move, like we can crawl across a paradigm, but I think Bitcoin, for example, like the best definition for me of transcendent is 0 to 1, right? It's this idea of like we move from, we are now in the paradigm of the state, and Bitcoin doesn't try and change the state to be a better state. It transcends the notion of state and gives us a completely new paradigm within which to operate. So that's what I mean by
totally buy that. I thought you were into religious territory. There's some phrases here and there, like that life is experimental. That sort of hints at that there is someone conducting an experiment. You know what I mean? And I think these ways of framing reality, we have to be really careful with words here, because it might lead to a thought in the wrong direction.
Interesting, because I actually even your experimental point, I actually view completely outside of the context of a controller or an experimenter. Okay. I kind of view that you know, for me, experimentation almost is life in its process of living, in the sense that, you know, whether we started off as a big bang or whatever, like the only reason life exists is that it's some sort of you know, randomness. It's like, it's almost this, you know, I can't remember whether it was Stephen Hawking or something that I was reading, where it's, you know, there was one bit of antimatter per billion bits of matter that was like an imbalance, and that sort of proliferated into what we have now, which is, you know, this fundamental, you know, slight minuscule imbalance, which was basically a piece of randomness injected into what one might argue would have been a completely perfect you know, universe. But life itself is this irregularity inside this framework of perfection.
There is a thought there, or a theory there, about life actually being the easiest way for molecules to organize themselves in order to speed up entropy. because everything goes. And this is I took some notes in your conversation with Gigi and Breedlove about entropy, because
Sure.
I view it in a different way. Let's see here what I wrote. Like they use entropy in the sense that entropy is like the what's the word they're using?
Chaos.
Resolution of uncertainty. Like, and therefore Bitcoin is the ultimate way to like rises up, like make humans control entropy in that sense. But I think the more effective a free market system is, and the more effective our collective collaborations is, the more entropy there will be in the world, because every action causes an equally big reaction, and the more effective we are, the more wasteful we are, because it's not like being more effective makes us slow down the process of wanting civilization to grow and become even more excellent at all the stuff we do. I think there's no way to like counter entropy, because entropy is connected to everything. And the theory about life being the easiest path for a molecule to go in order to reach higher entropy is based on, like, if you have two rocks, it takes quite a while for them to reach more entropy. But if you have a human that tries to like order these rocks in a specific like try to build a house or a wall out of them, then that human uses a lot of energy, and a lot of heat is produced, and a lot of friction, and a lot of like a lot of energy is turns into a different state. And that's actually what entropy really is. It's on a very deep fundamental physics level entropy. You can't really separate entropy, a piece of entropy, from all the other entropy that's around. And I think that's sort of misleading. Maybe this is hard to follow. I've been thinking of how to express this. Yeah.
So, okay, when referring to entropy, are we there's an assumption of waste, correct? Like that's effectively, like when you're talking about funneling energy into a specific purpose, and in doing so there's the waste energy that does not contribute to that specific purpose.
Exactly.
When I look at something like Bitcoin, that is the great preserver of entropy, because you're gathering data on what the free market desires, and it's captured in this kind of like pure economic medium. So is there entropy when it comes to Bitcoin? Like in an essence, we're trying to establish like a measuring stick for value in human time, and every bit of energy, regardless of where it's flowing around elsewhere, it is contributing in the end to that. So where's, I guess I'm trying to get at what aspect of contributing to that is entropy. What's wasted?
Like entropy is the direction of time, everything going from orderliness to more chaos on a molecular level and on a subatomic level, like going from more orderly matter into more unorganized matter. But and this is what I'm talking, like converting that into a using that word in the context of a free market, and us organizing and making stuff more organized and better functioning and more orderly, it's sort of missing the point about what entropy is, because in doing so we create a lot of entropy and like waste, as you called it, these are all like human frameworks of how we view the world and how we choose to frame stuff. But for us, of course, it's good if we can organize stuff in a more orderly manner, but it does not decrease the overall entropy of what's going on the planet. I think there's that could easily be misunderstood if you use the word in the wrong sense, like outside of physics.
Do you think the total entropy remains static then, or do you think it increases? Like, do you think there's a direction to it, or it doesn't matter what we do?
I in a way, it doesn't matter what we do, because it's all in our little bubble here in our little solar system that is such a minuscule part of the greater whole. So it doesn't really matter either way, because like 4 billion years and we'll all eaten by the sun anyway and stuff like that. But if we want to one day like conquer other planets or whatever the long-term goal of humanity is, we need to find ways of harnessing the energy that's around us to more and more orderliness. So in that sense, if you choose to use entropy in the word in that sense, then I guess there's a point to it. But I think there could be a lot of confusion there. I prefer the word uncertainty and the resolution of uncertainty in another context. It like I have a hard time expressing these thoughts, but
yeah, that's a hard one, because that really requires like you know a whole that would be like a whole podcast just on entropy. There was one thing that you mentioned though that I didn't agree with, which is the more effective we get, the more waste we create, and I don't know if I agree with that, because
depends on how you define waste. I mean, all civilizations, the more civilized, we use up more and more energy. Like the relationship between energy usage and how civilized we are go hand in hand. It's linear. It follows very linearly.
Yep.
And I don't believe that we will stop doing that just because we have a better tool of communicating value over time and space.
I agree. Yep. I don't think we're going to use less energy, but I think we're going to use energy better.
Yeah.
I don't think, so I think that means less waste. Sorry.
Yes, from our perspective, but it's still, the level of entropy is still wasteful from a like pure physics perspective. Especially if you include the mining rigs, which are really entropy machines.
Again, I think this is an instance where Bitcoin may even shift the way we think of and define entropy, because entropy, like, we're kind of referring to it. It seems like we're all referring to it in slightly different ways, in that some were referring to physical energy contributing to actual physical
it's quite well defined by Maxwell and those guys that like.
So like I'm looking at a definition right now, the degradation of matter and energy in the universe to an ultimate state of inert uniformity, or a process of degradation or running down, or a trend to disorder, chaos, disorganization, randomness. That's kind of my framework of thinking of it. And the interesting thing to me is that Bitcoin thrives on that kind of lack of uniformity, because those are data points. Like if you, from a really zoomed out perspective, you could look at Roger Ver as entropy of the Bitcoin system, but that data contributed to a more robust and efficient Bitcoin. So like, I don't know. I guess like if the end goal is knowledge of what how the market is valuing everything, human time, then the entropy of, like, I don't see waste energy there, because it's all data that flows into that system. So
yeah, you could be, again, you could use the word in the sense that you just used it, Ben, or like how Gigi and Breedlove used it. I just think we should be careful with the definitions of things, because using the word entropy in this sense is not really how the word was meant to be used. It's used for something. We should have another word for this specific, like streamlining uncertainty to humanity's favor. That we should. I'm just looking for another word than entropy.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying.
Well, I'm
not against it in any way.
I'm looking at the dictionary. They do have two very kind of separate views of it. One is statistical mechanics, and one is communication theory.
Yeah.
So again, I think I'm leaning towards the communication theory versus
that might be
statistical mechanics.
It might be that I'm just aware of the pure physics sense of the word, and that I wasn't aware that there's another use case for it. But it's like the same thing with the words information and energy, which in both those words are really well defined in pure physics.
I think context and scale matters here, because if we're talking in the context of our world, then I think it's a fitting term to use. But yeah, like if you chunk all the way up to universal entropy, then it becomes a much harder thing to kind of frame up. Okay, coming back to definitions, we've gone on a series of amazing tangents there. Have you guys ever read The Hyperion?
The Hyperion?
No.
Yeah, by Dan Simmons.
No, haven't.
Fuck, it's such a powerful, like, if you guys like, I don't know if you guys like sci-fi or anything like that, but it is by far the best sci-fi I've ever read. Like, he weaves sci-fi philosophy, these ideas of entropy, life, time, love, and he's got this concept in there of the void that binds, which is such an interesting concept, and it's relevant to this discussion in some ways. But maybe we'll have to do a round two. But it kind of, in there, there's the battle between sort of like the humans and the AIs. But humans have this misconception of the AIs being one of three factions, when in reality they're also their own life form, which are made up of hundreds of millions of competing AIs that are that, much like human beings and other species of life, are in constant flux and competition. Like, they're, to use a Talebian word, they're ergodic in nature. It's like it's all dynamic, and it's such an interesting book. But it's actually a series of 4 books. So there's Hyperion, the Rise of Hyperion. Sorry, Hyperion, the Fall of Hyperion, then Endymion, and the Rise of Endymion. They're absolutely incredible. But
are they better
anyway,
than the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy?
Way fucking better. Way better.
Okay.
Like, it's in a universe of its own. Like, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is good, it's funny, but this shit is like a billion times better. I couldn't even.
All right.
Yeah. So definitions. Let's define atheism, and then I want to define truth. So let's go with you first with defining atheism.
Yeah, this is a word that many, mostly religious people, misinterpret, because they view it as a disbelief in God, that the atheism is the position of there is no God, and this is not what it is. It's the lack of a belief in God. So an atheist is like, I could call myself an a tooth fairyist or an Santa Clausist as well, because I don't believe in
that's very bigoted of you.
Yeah, very bigoted.
It's very
I don't
misogynistic.
believe I don't believe in Santa Claus or the Tooth Fairy or
You
any
don't
type
sound
of
very.
deity.
You don't sound very spiritual, my friend.
So,
Maybe not, but there's a definition there. Like, I don't exclude the possibility of there. Like most atheists, I don't exclude the possibility of there being like a divine being, but I think the odds are about the same as there being unicorns or tooth fairy or whatever. They might also exist, but I think that we have exactly the same odds of them existing as any type of supernatural force dictating our lives. So yeah, whereas an agnostic is like more 50-50, God may exist or may not exist. For me and other atheists, it's not 50-50, it's like it's almost 100%.
yeah, okay, interesting. Okay, that's a unique definition, because I've always thought the agnostic was a little bit more of where you're positioning atheists, maybe not a full 99.9%, but maybe an 80-20, whereas an atheist was 100 to 0. Benny, where's your sort of position on atheism?
Atheism is an interesting thing in that there's even a term for it, because by default, all existing life forms start out not believing in God until likely they read some sort of sacred text or are told of the existence of God by another human. So the fact that there's a term for the default predisposition of humans and all other life forms, and it's the term itself is like a term denoting like lacking something, whereas I think I think that the term theism should be the one that's more prevalent in society. Like, we should refer to theism as the and this isn't a dig on a little bit, I guess, but that should be the anomaly, not atheism. So again, to Knut's point, I think it's atheism is the default predisposition of every living thing on earth until told or learned otherwise.
Yep.
Interesting. Yeah. So my take, I guess, is I guess the word comes from the idea of the theology, and a theology is so to your point, Ben, is like it is a man-made study, effectively. So in my mind, an atheist is someone who is not for. I guess for me, it's more anti-religion than anti-God, or anti-religion versus anti-spirituality or whatever, which is where I kind of more so sit on the spectrum. It's funny because I was like a hardcore anti, belief in God and all of that as well. But these days, like, I don't know, I'm undecided. I think there's not God in the sense of a being, but of some sort of, I don't know, I'll use Dan Simmons' words from Hyperion, like a void that binds, like some sort of connectedness almost between us. So I'll ask about that in a moment. But yeah, for me, atheism is more about like I personally don't recognize any of the religions outside of the essence of some of their lessons, which I think were really good lessons and had good frameworks for understanding morality and values. But other than that, as a mechanism to understand a higher power, I think they're fucking useless. So
could you give an example? What is a good moral lesson from Christianity, for instance? And how do you know it stems from Christianity and not anything else that preceded Christianity?
well, I mean, stemming is a tough one because we don't know where, you know, many things really stemmed from, you know, so maybe Christianity gave us a framework through which, you know, to understand lessons. But I mean, the David and Goliath idea is a great one of, you know, the small up and coming, you know, the rebel being able to bring down the large tyrant by focusing their energy in the right spot. Like that is a really powerful moral story that I guess you know came out of Christianity in a sense.
But there were stories like that before the David and Goliath story.
I'm not saying
sure.
there wasn't. I'm not saying there wasn't. But what I'm saying is that in the strictly Christian sense is that they empowered that story with some sort of, you know, religious overtones to drive forward the importance of, you know, the value of the underdog. So I look at the essence of the lesson in itself, and I find importance and truth in that. Where it came from, where it stemmed from, I mean, that's anyone's fucking guess. None of us really know that.
I guess my question is, why is this story from the Bible more important than like the movie Star Wars or the book The Lord of the Rings, which are basically about exactly the same thing?
Correct.
Now they're not.
Now they're about making money for Mickey Mouse, but
I think it was in effectiveness of proliferating that story amongst everybody.
Yeah, exactly. It was a sequence of events. Like Christianity turned out to be the most effective way to pass on the values through narratives, and at the time, because of, you know, our state of call it collective evolution or the values frameworks within which we operated, it was a step up from, you know, the power god level, which is I tell you what to do and you listen.
And it doesn't speak to the validity of everything put together through religion. It's just that people discovered it was a very effective mechanism to communicate ideas, and those ideas could be both good and bad.
Yeah, but I feel always when people reference the Bible as a very good source of moral stories, I think they're cherry picking a lot, because the Bible is mostly filled with, like the Old Testament, it's just the morality in that is worthless. It's just an evil maniac killing everyone for masturbating and not giving their neighbors their goats and stuff. He's a real evil guy, that the Old Testament's God. And there's like no morality to be found there. And the New Testament, well, there's here and there, like the 10 Commandments, if you exclude the top 2 ones, they're sort of morally okay, but not like, and like the Jesus story of turning the other cheek and treating people exactly as how you would have been treated. I don't know if I have that's not really moral. I should take into consideration how the other person would want to be treated, not treat him exactly as I would have. Like there's nuance to all this, and these stories are too flawed to be like a good moral compass. I think they confuse.
I think you're also overgeneralizing. I think I've got 2 comments to that. Number one is, at the time, I think they were morally superior, which is why it probably, you know, proliferated more so than other systems, because, you know, maybe back then, you know, the idea of you know, slavery was perfectly moral, for example. So
it is
I think
in the Bible.
It may be, but, you know, I think there was many stories and I guess lessons passed on in the Bible that, you know, transcended some of the prior, which may have been worse, set of values and principles that that people sort of, you know, agreed on. So at the time, it may have been extremely relevant, but I still think many to date. So even in the Old Testament, I guess, you know, the bad or the rough God really spoke to, I think, truths like struggle, sacrifice, and things like, I mean, sacrifice, I think, is such a powerful idea. Like we in the modern world try and remove sacrifice from lives, when sacrifice is how you get growth. Sacrifice is how you find meaning. Like you cannot
How you find Bitcoin.
earn exactly how you find Bitcoin. So like sacrifice is at the very core of what it means to be human. And I think one of the strongest lessons, for example, in the Old Testament was the notion of sacrifice. And there was a bunch of stories in there which tried to send that message to
Yes,
people.
but it's so immoral to sacrifice a goat or sacrifice your sister or whatever. That's all they're sacrificing. They're never sacrificing like computing power. They're sacrificing other living
But
things.
they didn't
So
have
that's
computing
really
power.
not where it's at.
Okay, come on, man, that's a moot point. They didn't have compute power.
No,
So
but
back then, like,
sacrificing other other life forms is not a very effective way of getting to a certain end.
evolving sort of from a pagan place, though. That's exactly where we would have had to go next, right? So I mean, look at the Aztecs and the fucking Incas and the the original African tribes. They did a fucking hell of a lot worse, potentially.
I think
maybe Christianity institutionalized.
Yeah, but there were civilizations that were more civilized preceding Christianity. Christianity haven't been very civilized. Like we killed all the Indians on Cuba, for instance, like every tribe that lived there. Conquest, like so much atrocities have been done in the name of Christianity. And like I'm just not sure that the Bible is any better or worse than any other text that might have circulated at the time. It's just the one that happened to stay in the collective consciousness for a long time.
Why did it happen to, though?
Yeah, that's the thing. I don't believe the Lindy effect only tells you that it survived. It doesn't. Yeah, that it did. It says nothing about the merits of it. And like they still, when Galileo claimed that we revolve around the sun and not the other way around, he was thrown in prison, and his disciple is maybe not the right word, but his student Bruno, he was burned on a stake by the Catholic Church for saying such atrocity because the Bible said the opposite thing. Because God stopped the sun at some point.
This isn't a flaw of the Bible. I would argue that this is a flaw of organized, institutionalized religion.
Yeah, but it's a flaw.
Though.
It's a flaw of people taking the texts literally. And the more literally you take them, the more dangerous it is. So, and at the other end of that arrow is not taking them seriously at all. And that's my viewpoint is that that's probably the best thing. Don't take this seriously at all. Try to figure it out for yourself. What's the best moral thing to do here?
See,
that's just the opposite of the spectrum.
Yeah. See, I would disagree. I would say that there's I think taking them literally is stupid because A, they're outdated. B, they were sort of they emerged in a time that was I mean, it was thousands of years ago when we lived in a very different world. But I still do believe that the essence of the lessons within them are I still think carry extreme wisdom because
extreme, really?
Yeah, I really do. I think there was powerful wisdom for people to have come up with lessons and metaphors back then in a world that was fucking full of chaos and killing and slavery and fucking emperors and
but you still believe that it was all man-made and not that no.
Yeah, of course I do. Of course I do. Of course I do. So and that's where my respect comes from.
Don't you think
my respect?
You having grown up knowing about this specific religion has skewed your views on it a lot because there are 5,000 other religions that probably
I didn't grow up Christian.
Okay, sorry. Sorry about that. But you grew up knowing about Christianity.
A little bit, yeah. But I guess through at least the lens of a bit of orthodoxy. But it's funny, when I was in school, because my school didn't recognize our religion as Macedonians, as Macedonian Orthodox, I never studied the Bible. I never read the Bible. I never, all I had was my grandmother having fucking photos of Jesus and all that sort of shit all over the house and, praying. But I was never part of Bible studies because my school automatically threw me into the non-scripture class. So I never did any of that, which was interesting. So I only started looking at some of the texts in the Bible actually after I was an atheist, long after I had renounced God. So when I was 18, I decided that, I don't want to have anything to do with God or religion or any of that sort of stuff.
You say that you renounced God. That must have meant that you, at some point in time, believed there was one. Like
I did, absolutely, but but that didn't stem from me reading the Bible or going through scripture or any of that sort of stuff.
No.
It came just as a function of me being born into a Macedonian Orthodox family who believed that there was a God. And I mean, when I was young, I used to fucking pray and ask for shit and all that sort of stuff. So as I started learning about life and growing up, I started questioning, what is this stuff? It must have actually started because when I was baptized as a kid, and this is actually on video somewhere, is as the priest was putting me in the bowl and baptizing me, and he held me in front of him, I pissed in his face, and
so he got baptized
like
too, in a way.
Exactly, and you see all the old grannies, they're all just like with their hands, they're like he's the Antichrist. So my rebelliousness started off young, but yeah, I still the more in recent times that I've sort of read and I've come to respect that, some sort of order, lesson, and essence of like morality and values came out of a period of time in history, which was really, I guess, in the spiral dynamics context, read in nature. Now, you did have other people who had those thoughts. You look at the Stoicism, you look at the Taoists in China. So there were other strong philosophies, and they've also stood the test of time. But I think Christianity, seemed to win because it was able to be institutionalized, and it used the the incentives on violence and cooperation to violent ends much better than the more peaceful philosophies like Taoism or Stoicism, etc. Which is why it probably won out at the time. But for me, that does not preclude a lot of what I think are powerful lessons in texts, like whether it's the Bible or the Quran or fucking any of those things. I believe they all have interesting texts and ideas, and essences of good values.
I think civilization happened despite despite the existence of the Bible, and not because of it. It probably hindered us morally more than helped us. I think that's my viewpoint.
I think all institutionalization has hindered us, much like the nation state, I think, has hindered us. I think the church hindered us. Yes. So I think that the natural state of experimentation and evolution happens in spite. And I think these parasites like the church, like the state, were parasites that sucked on human beings' naturally forward progressing productive capacity.
So let's say the Bible was never written. Do you think we would have ended up like in a better place now or a worse place now? Like if the year 2000, which would be called something else then, because we wouldn't have BC.
I think we would have chosen some other text, and I think we would have deified it. So I think the whole religious experiment was something that we had to go through.
That's sort of what we did, because Christianity is a mishmash of all types of other pagan religions. Like there were many like sons of God before Jesus, like Horus and Ra and all of these examples of that had 12 disciples and were resurrected and stuff. It's not from there, and
correct. So I think
sorry, I was just going to say again. I do lean to the idea that religions and nation states at one point served a purpose as a again, like talking back to our points on communication, as a method of communicating different ideas that could be good or bad, but they were just the most efficient ways at the time when you couldn't get on-demand data of what everybody was thinking and doing. And now that we've moved into that, we found a much more efficient way to do that.
Yeah.
And with religious and nation state kind of institutions, those could be co-opted and corrupted and perverted. Whereas as you move into again, the idea of the meritocracy based systems, you don't have that. You just have, well, these are the rules that this system goes by, and there's other options out there, and whichever one flourishes the most wins. You kind of had a way where, regardless of the initial intent of whoever started said religion, and whatever people intended on doing with that religion and the lessons that they chose, whoever rose to the top of those institutions or those democratically elected people, they can be co-opted, they can be subverted, they can be corrupted, and so I think, again, religion was an efficient way of trying to communicate ideas at the time that was able to be perverted by those who got into power and had incentives to do so.
Yep.
I'm writing 2 notes here, so I want to make a note on that. To extend on that point that you just mentioned, Benny, I've got religion and nation states helped us transcend, or call it subvert, the dominant power at the time. So if you look at when sort of religion emerged as an idea, it sort of emerged a couple hundred years after sort of this decaying Roman Empire and things like that. So it emerged as almost like as an antidote to the chaos that was happening at the time. And much like as the church decayed, and as it became the draconian authoritarian beast that it was, which gave people a fucking a fine effectively, which was you pay your due in order to have sex with your wife, in order to eat on a Wednesday, or whatever other stupid rule emerged. The nation state almost emerged as a fuck you to the church, and we sort of had this separation of church and state. But the actual the long-term institutionalization of this new system that emerged each time is what allowed it to decay. And here we are now at the end of the nation state, with something that originally emerged for the protection of private property, to push against the church, who was seriously transgressing on everyone's natural right. It emerged as a way to push back on that. It has now become the dominant force that impedes on private property rights, and it is the thing that we now need to topple and subvert, in much the same way each of these things did before that.
I agree mostly. I'm not convinced that neither religions or nation states were like invented with a good intention at all from the beginning. It might have been
that they were
chaotic, but I think as soon as a psychopath got their hands on, like, hang on a minute, I can use this for my own evil purposes, that's what happened. And like, power hungry people will end up on top of, regardless of what system they operate under. And that's why another reason why I love Bitcoin so much is because there are no leaders on top, and there's no one controlling the thing, and there's like nothing they can do about it.
Look, I think the human tendency to want to have an advantage over others is always going to exist, and we create structures, or we create mechanisms for cooperation that are harder to co-opt. Now, I think religion was much easier to co-opt because it had this ethereal sense of it, whereas the nation state was a little bit harder to co-opt to a degree. And, it took, potentially, I mean, although it's probably just as corrupt now as the church was, in its time, it's a more advanced level of corrupt. Maybe one could argue it's even more dangerous than the church was at its peak, because it is far more powerful than the church was. But I don't know, we weren't around then, so we can't really sort of tell or sense. But
I think I think there's another reason too for the success of the church for such an extended period of time, and then the nation state and our gradual transition into software-based society is it was a deferral of personal responsibility. So you could say, hey, whatever happens, it's not my fault. It's somebody else's grand plan, so on and so forth. There was that with religion. There's that absolute deferral of personal responsibility. Like I was led astray by demons. Or God had my back with this. It was God's will, so on and so forth. And then you had a shift once those institutions became so corrupt and eventually decayed and gave way to the nation state. There's still this deferral of personal responsibility, because you elect your representative, and they can or may not, in most cases may not actually do what the will of the people is. And even still, with recent elections, you have a country like the US divided effectively in two, on two sides of the spectrum. And so you then have somewhere in the realm of 50% of the people being able to be like, well, I didn't vote for this, so I'm deferring my personal responsibility upon these elected officials, and they're the ones in charge, and they're the reason for the problems in this country. We're shifting completely away from that and to a system of complete personal responsibility. And I think we're just getting to that tipping point where the nation state is corrupt enough that people are willing to take on that personal responsibility and move to another system, because it's very easy to defer that personal responsibility to somebody else as long as your life is good enough. But as soon as things get in the way, as soon as you start being able to not do the things that you want to, or it's enough of a drag on your own life, then you say, all right, I'm willing to take things into my own hands. And I think we're seeing that transition now.
Yeah. And it's as scary as it is exciting.
Indeed.
Man, the personal responsibility thing, I just took a bunch of notes, is such a powerful piece, I think. So it's another, literally in the thing that I'm writing about, utopias are the path to dystopia in this new piece. And I've got a section in there which talks about choosing rights or responsibility. So these days people fucking run around creating a new right every week. And what they don't realize is that one person's right is another person's responsibility. But, as all fiat-minded morons, think, or these, intelligentsia, or the academic bureaucrats, or the state planners, is they think they can isolate rights outside of responsibilities, which is not how reality works.
Yeah, it's deeper than that. Like a government, no one outside of yourself can give you a right. You're born with all the rights in the world. They can only take rights away.
I think you're born with one right, and that's the right to choose. I think all other rights boil down to that, or they're just some fucking made up right.
Yeah, they're made up because, like, who in the right mind can buy into that someone can give you a right? Like, you're born and then you can be hindered in ways of doing whatever you want. Like, a government can only hinder you, and then they call it a right when they choose to not hinder you from doing certain things. Like no one should be able to dictate over other people in that way, and that's
correct. Because that takes away the fundamental right of individual choice. So I think
exactly.
That is the first and only right. Like things like rights about like, oh, it's a human right to have food and it's a human right to have. No, it's not. That's something you earn because you have to put in work to do that. It's not your right, because, you know, if that's the trajectory you want to take, then whose responsibility is to give you that fucking right?
It's not a right if someone else has to sacrifice something for you in order to get that right. It can never be a right if it affects other people in that sense.
I think I was talking to you, Knut, when you said, you know, from a fundamental level, imagine if you were dropped into the middle of the forest completely naked, and, you know, what rights do you have there? You can move, you can try to do whatever you want, but at some point, like if a wild animal comes along and eats you, you know, like you have whatever actions you can take. It's not like you're gifted rights. You just exist. You have
the cards you're giving at the start of the game on your hand, and that's the cards you have to play. You can't just steal other people's cards. That's not how it's supposed to work.
That example there just literally reinforces, and I might actually steal that example, is and put it in my piece, is that the right to choose is all you have. You get dropped in a jungle, all you have is the right to choose. That's it. Nothing. You don't have any other fucking choice after that. Like, and this is where free will sort of comes in. Is, you know, you can then choose to die, you choose to give up, or choose to do something about it.
There's a Bitcoin metaphor along these lines. Like, Bitcoin is that kid that you threw out into the jungle. I think it's Antonopoulos that said that. Throw a kid into the jungle and wait 20 years, and if he comes out of the jungle still alive, it's going to be a beast. And that's what Bitcoin did. Yeah.
So anyway, I want to finish this thread on responsibility. So I think responsibility and rights was that piece, but coming back to what you said, Ben, earlier about, like, responsibility being reintroduced, I would actually argue that responsibility was reintroduced every time we had the toppling of an existing power. So if you look at, prior to the church, we had sort of the whether it was the Roman times, whether it was, the early empires, they sort of removed responsibility by, through authoritarian or dictatorship type means, right? It's like, we own this and you are our subject. And as a result, responsibility was removed. And as that continued, the system itself decayed. So like Taleb says this really nicely. He says, removal of skin in the game is how the system rots. And effectively, responsibility is literally, another word for it is skin in the game, right? It's, personal responsibility is skin in the game. Can I just make sure you're there, dude? Because I've got a black screen.
I'm here. I'm good. Cool. Yeah.
Sweet.
Yeah. So, keep going. Sorry.
So if you look at the original ideas in texts like the Bible, they were actually about taking a responsibility again as an individual. So recognizing things like sacrifice and struggle and, the individual again. And what was interesting is that kind of reintroduction of responsibility was what deviated from, that original draconian thing. Then as the church then took responsibility away by institutionalizing the teachings that came from texts like, whether it was the Bible or whatever the fuck else was at the time, then it, decayed by removing responsibility from the individuals or the constituents. And now here we are again, where we're at peak non-responsibility because the state has removed all personal agency. We can't choose. I mean, we can't even choose to run our own fucking businesses. There's that, the Toronto barbecue at the moment. They can't fucking cook food for people, and they've got a lineup of 100 cops closing the thing down. So they're absolutely removing every piece of personal and individual agency and responsibility. And that is the sign of the decay of the system. So here we got, again, the introduction of Bitcoin, which is the ultimate manifestation or embodiment of, responsibility at the individual level, coming right in time to break the back of the collectivist, top-down, unnatural system that has removed all agency and responsibility. So I actually see almost like it's happened cyclical. A couple times.
Yeah, it's cyclical. Like I think you're absolutely right. Like you get a system that's supposed to be breaking away from tyranny, and that system works really well for a time, but if it's in any way corruptible, then that power will siphon away responsibility from the individual and try to assume that they know better than the individual does, than the collective of every individual on their own does. And as that power coalesces on a single point, eventually you have another breakaway that gives yet again more personal responsibility in the face of tyranny. So yeah, it's absolutely cyclical, or the pendulum swings far on each side of the spectrum and rinse and repeat. And so for me, the question now is, in what way can Bitcoin be co-opted and perverted down? I think if possible, it will be much later that happens. But how do we break that cycle? I don't know.
I don't know. Well, this is why I kind of come back to the idea that, Bitcoin is sort of the our opportunity to get through the great filter. Because I think seriously, I think most species blow themselves up around this period where, they get to the point where they are powerful enough to do one of two things. So again, in this new piece that I'm writing about, utopia and dystopias, is this idea that collectivism and, trying to sanitize life with the message of equality and safety, and in the process removing life from fucking life, is the height of arrogance and hubris, which is where we are today, right? It's like, the state will keep you safe. For your safety, we're going to beat the shit out of you, if you don't wear a mask. Like it's like, the state has come to a point where it is literally sanitizing and sterilizing the life out of life. And it's not that that's going to work. So my only two fears are these two, which is, do these idiots, these clowns, blow us all up in the process, like the fucking USSR nuked itself during Chernobyl, like a bunch of idiots, or do they, in their ignorant and arrogant pursuit of a utopia, develop some sort of AI shit that makes us all obsolete in the process? So like, if collectivism wins here, like we all fail. So my only concern is not that these guys are right, because they're not. They're going to fail 100%. Is that, do they take us all down with them? And Bitcoin's sort of like the final tool of individual sovereignty that may help us get through that great filter, so that we come out on the other end genuinely transcendent, not in a theistic sense, but in the sense that we sort of leave a chapter behind of institutions that can be co-opted and corrupted.
I hope that Bitcoin is that thing that breaks the cycle of meet the new boss, same as the old boss. I hope that Bitcoin is that thing. But I think that in order for, I think it would succeed anyway, regardless of what any one of us does, really. But if we want to propel this thing ahead, and if we want a smooth transition rather than a violent one, we should focus on cooperation, because that's what Bitcoin is all about. It mitigates, it removes violence from the equation, and we should be open to discussion, because remember the two options, discussion and violence. And this is why I kind of think that some dogmatic thinking in some Bitcoiners, or like the frivolous blocking of everyone that says anything wrong when they're drunk or whatever on Twitter, and like removing every idea that you don't like. I'm sort of against that, because it's sort of against the ethos of choosing cooperation instead of choosing violence.
I might push back on that a little bit. I actually don't think violence is necessarily a bad thing. I actually think conflict and violence is actually natural. It's just how conscious is the application of violence. So if we look at the essence of the energy of violence, so if you try and like, let's say we could hypothetically sterilize violence from our genes. Like, we could go in there and genetically remove violence out of it. Think about like the essence or the nature of where violence comes. Like, violence is just it's a greater, or it's a more extreme version of aggression or passion, or that sort of energetic level of us, which comes out in everything from sports to writing to art to literature to expression to debate and all that sort of stuff. So I don't think we can remove violence. What, all we can do is learn to, we can change the return on violence, which is why I just love that concept, is that so I think that's a very, like, this is why I don't like I was listening to Kanye talk about utopias with fucking Joe Rogan. I'm like, man, utopias are exactly how we get to fucking North Korea. North Korea is a utopia. You don't have violence there because no one wants to fucking fight because they're all scared shitless. So the ability to disagree, the ability to argue, the ability to think freely presupposes violence. It's just how extreme that violence is dependent upon the return you're going to get from being violent.
Exactly. And that's what Bitcoin does. It diminishes those returns.
Yes, exactly.
Especially when everyone has more than 99% of all their belongings in their heads.
Yes.
Then that's the point we want to get to. We want Bitcoin to be above all other assets and all other belongings, so that most of our wealth, or most of the things we value, are communicatable and in our heads. When knowing truly is owning, that's when violence takes the back seat, I think.
Correct.
And
the thing about
the
extreme of violence.
And the thing about letting people in and talking to people and keeping the conversation going, that ties into not becoming the other side. Because if we refuse to talk to someone because they were at one point in time associated with whatever ism we don't like or whatever, then we're no better than the social justice warriors or the left wings, because that's what they do. They create these, like, I'm never going to talk to him because he was once befriended a guy who was in the KKK or whatever, so I can't be associated with that person. And if we start doing that thing, we're no better than them. I think, like, open discussion and free speech, that's the First Amendment, and the violence is the Second Amendment, right?
Yeah. Look, I think even that one's a little bit nuanced though, because, like, that's where sort of reputation comes from. So, like, would I ever talk to somebody who has the belief system of an AOC or a fucking Kamala Harris or a Hillary Clinton? I don't think so. That they would have to prove that the belief systems and the values through which they function have changed, not because I'm better.
That's a slightly different thing. Of course you have to choose who you talk to, because you have a limited amount of lifetime to do these conversations. And I'm very happy to be talking to you two guys instead of talking to AOC, for instance, or
Stephanie Kelton.
But but that doesn't mean I have to violently exclude everything I disagree with from my life or from my feeds. I think, like, the opposite opinion to whatever opinion I have, or like different viewpoints, they help me get better over time, because I can mentally prepare for an argument with this person, and I can like envision what I would say to make my point to a moron.
I think on that point, I guess we could kind of loosely get back to the idea of entropy in a non-physical sense, but it brings us back to the idea of and again, I guess, Aleks, to your point, as far as like filtering your time and where it's useful, bad ideas understood as far as where they're coming from and where those positions how they were formed can be valuable in that one of two things are going to happen. One, you're going to realize the exact counter arguments and how those arguments are wrong, and then be able to better convey that to either that individual or people entertaining those ideas. Or two, in the instance that you hold a belief that's not correct, you'll discover that. So
Yes.
either way, it leads you towards truth. And in essence, there, as long as you set the parameters of, okay, I believe this because boom, 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 and then you can very, I guess, efficiently and categorically go down a list. Like I kind of have a list of myself in terms of Bitcoin, why everything else is a shitcoin. And I have, okay, well, it's got to hit these. And if it doesn't hit these points, then I'm not going to entertain anything. And it's to the point where literally I'll be like, well, point one, and then I'm done. Right. So, and I think that's what Bitcoiners have done. They've said, this is what's important. Does anything does it address these points, and do I entertain it further? So like there's merit to taking some amount of time to entertain an idea, but once you have those counter arguments fleshed out, if somebody can't respond to those counter arguments, then it uses your time the most efficiently that it can be used, I suppose.
Yeah, and there's like another trend among certain Bitcoiners is to be sort of anti-science, or like anti every science that you can't repeat the experiments of in your own home. And like if you can't verify it for yourself, you can't believe it at all. And that's also a dangerous route, I think, because we have to believe people to a certain extent. You can't really live your life without standing on the shoulders of giants in a way, because like this computer in front of me, it works. I know that it works because it does what I think it will do. And in order for that to happen, a lot of scientific theories have to precede that and be correct. So I can by default believe in all of those because I know that they work. And that's like someone asked me on Twitter about an experiment in evolution, if there was an evolutionary experiment that you could do in your own home, and like if there's a way to observe evolution playing out in an experiment, and that's like, but evolution to me is it's such a basic thing, and like when you see the world through that lens, it's kind of obvious that it happens. So why would you even want to why I mean, fiat science is one thing, but yeah.
That
Go on,
falls
Alex.
into the realm of like, being able to like come to a priori truths and like timeless principles and things like that, because like it reminds me of, there's this meme called like the e-scientist, which is a monkey on Reddit that asks for a source on everything, right? And it's like fucking like there's things that are like, I think everyone should do some reading on understanding what a priori means. Is it's like it doesn't need empirical evidence to show that it's true, and this is where sort of this almost ties into the idea of objective truth versus subjective truth, right? Is there's some things in life which are true, like you can't be, object A cannot be in two places at once, like the time moves forward in time, so like like more of the same thing is worth more. Like there's these truths that are fundamentally true that you don't need empirical evidence to prove, and from those truths you can actually deduce other things. Like if you follow some sort of deductive logic, you can come to other things. And this is actually the basis upon which libertarianism and economic theory, or at least Austrian or natural economic theory, work from, which is you can't model a fucking economy, because what happened today is completely different than what's happening tomorrow and every other day. So you can't actually do any empirical type scientific study on any form of economy, because all humans are different, resources are scarce, time moves forward, and the future is uncertain. You have these truths that
this is what Austrian economics is all about. And I look at it like this, like the purer a form of science is, the more you can take it for granted. And to me, that like the most pure ones are Austrian economics and mathematics. You can almost trust everything that stems from those two things. And everything, the further away a branch of science is from that, like gender theory, for instance, which is on the opposite side, like it's complete bullshit, and everyone in it is delusional and bought by some, like it's so weird. You can discard everything, like like Christopher Hitchens said, that which can be asserted without evidence can be dismissed without evidence. And the further away from mathematics or praxeology a discipline is, the more bullshit it contains. That's how I view it. So the natural sciences are much more truthful than the social sciences, for instance, because they're all based on opinions.
Yeah, absolutely. So like I think you just nailed it. Praxeology and math are the two things, like at the very core. Like I always say, like, if for people who want to learn anything about life, before you study psychology, before you study anything, do some math and some praxeology. You get a grasp around those, you start to understand everything else.
Exactly, and it's so
rooted
weird
in those first
that
principles.
we learn about one of them in school, and the other one is unknown to most people.
Absolutely unknown. Yeah.
Praxeology is such an, like, reading Human Action was like reading Newton or something to me. It's like an epiphany. Like, yeah, of course this is how it works, and of course this is, he said the things I've been suspecting my entire life, and just put them into words so beautifully. If you haven't read Human Action, do your homework.
I haven't finished reading it. I've read the little bits of the initial part, but it's like I've read overviews and summaries, and like it's just the study of human action, and like I always say, like, economics, but I think praxeology is the more fundamental of the things. Is economics is sort of like praxeology, mixed with incentives and mixed with some sort of predictive stuff. But praxeology is like the core basic
and it outlines why you can't use mathematics in that realm, why mathematics does not apply. And that's really important, because to someone who have a natural inclination for mathematics, such I have no problem with mathematics. It comes sort of natural to me, and I always did. So it took me a long time to discover praxeology, partly because of that, I think, because it's so hard to grasp that there's a branch of science that can't be touched by mathematics at all. and it's economics and praxeology, and it's so hard to wrap your head around, because you're so intuitively you think that mathematics is at the base level of truth and at the core of everything, but praxeology it's really an eye-opener. And of course, when I say everyone should read Human Action, there are other sources as well which are also good, but like everyone should study praxeology is what I'm saying.
Absolutely. It's funny, it almost reminds me a little bit of like the things like, because I guess for people who don't know what praxeology is, it's kind of like thinking in terms of like heuristics and principles, and like just these truths that you don't need to prove. And I think almost like when they say bro science over like the modern science, it's like bro science is almost like it's a low resolution version of praxeology. It's like shit that, you know, we've tried out, we've tested, we've used, and we sort of know that it works. And it's anyway, an interesting parallel there. I want to come back on the topic of religion, and I want to just I wrote something here which was contextually important earlier, but we've kind of gone past it. But I do want to bring it up one more time before we wrap up that chapter, and then there's some other things I want to go into. But when we're talking about the Bible and we're talking about religion, we're talking about would we be here, and would we have sort of, you know, would religion have slowed us down, or would the nation state and everything have slowed us down? So I just wanted to finalize like one bit of point, which really just ties back to the Bible as a piece of text outside of, you know, its religious perception, is that I think that the Bible itself, outside of its, you know, religious undertones and, you know, and how it's sort of been, you know, used as the cornerstone of the church, I think, you know, is almost agnostic if you look at the essence, not its literal, you know, text, but the essence of its lessons and sort of the values that it embodies. But I think where the problem happened was the religionization and the subsequent institutionalization of, you know, the church, religion, and Bible. That is where the problem lied. Whereas if we had it as a text that you could read as a fucking book, minus the religious undertones or the fucking overbearing element of the church, I think it's a valuable book. And that's kind of where my position sits on the Bible versus religion and things like that.
It may not have had the staying power and the spread that it had because of that, though. I think
correct.
Yeah. Again, like the mechanism of again, the deferral of personal responsibility paired with the fear of an omnipotent being that could crush you for doing the wrong thing or you know, breaking its rules. It would have, it may not have gotten to anybody at all. And would something else have taken its place? Probably. Would that thing been just another religion that could have been co-opted? Probably. But yes, I agree. Like in essence, had it been a text of, hey, these are some lessons that we learned from doing the following, and we think this, then it could have, if you had the mechanism through which to spread that text and iterate upon it, and because it would no longer be dogmatic, then humanity over the past however many thousands of years would be much better off being able to look at it as such. But I think we're just getting to that point now where we can proliferate that kind of information across societies efficiently, and actually have it take and have staying power. But you know, back then, those were the breaks, right? That's what you got.
Well, there's a missing piece of this puzzle. There's a huge missing piece of this puzzle, and that's we're talking about the contents of the Bible all the time, and we're forgetting that people were illiterate for a very long time. Like, people couldn't read the Bible until very recently. People didn't know what was in it. So the book itself, like that's being a book and being a thing that only the wise could understand, helped it survive because it was so mystical, though, that only the wisest among us can understand it. That's what it was for most of its existence, and that's what the Quran is right now, because it's forbidden to translate it into anything else than Arabic and stuff like that. They try to keep it veiled in this mystique, aura of mystique, like. And I believe that was the main driving force that made the Bible survive as a sacred text for such a long time. It had nothing to do with its contents, not really. It was just like a MacGuffin, if you will. Like this is the thing here that
maybe from an institutionalized perspective and its ability to be the the object, because it's almost like it was like a talisman, I guess, what you're saying in that case.
Yeah,
it wasn't,
yeah.
yes, but I would still say that at a grassroots level, the lessons and the narratives and the stories in there, which is how a lot of that those ideas were sort of passed on. Again,
I'm not
were
sure
still
that people
important,
were
like,
even aware of them. Like I'm not sure that, like,
maybe not. Maybe not. I still feel like there's too much in society today that has undertones of some of those things. Like, so for example, what Ben said earlier is like the fear of God, like in the fear of going to hell. One could interpret that as almost as a way to create a narrative or it was a visualization or a representation of the very real thing, which is your own conscience of doing something bad, and feeling guilty or bad about it, and sort of the hell was the way of expressing that own internal guilt, and sickening feeling of doing something bad to someone else, for example.
But it's also an awful notion. Psychology experiments have shown that we are our bad conscience is to a large extent what drives us forwards. We have a constant bad conscience about something. We're always in regret deep down, like for like, I could be better at this, I could be friendlier to this person. Like morals are rooted in a constant bad conscience. And I think the notion of hell and the notion of like, my neighbor died, it must have been because I didn't pray enough, or because I didn't do that in this ritual. It's kind of a horrible way of looking at life, and it's a horrible way of raising children, because they're taught to they're getting taught that there are connections where there really aren't no connections. Like you said with the jungle and the lightning thing, Christianity is no better than that. It's like if you do sins, for instance, that should have some impact on some other aspects of your life. It doesn't matter if you're sinful or not. You can be lucky anyway. Like there's no real
I
thing
agree.
there.
I agree, but I still do think that it was necessary at the time, because we do need some sort of constraint on behavior. Like, if we're all unhinged, in the absence of some sort of moral constraint, and maybe at the time this was the most useful way. These narratives of a higher power, again, thinking about where we had come from prior. These narratives of a higher power were were clearly the most successful way, but maybe also the most functional way at the time to constrain, rather, abhorrent behavior.
I'm not
Perhaps
convinced.
that may have been the intent, though. That like we can't really suppose intent based on where individual religions came from the inception of them, but that may have been the intent of some of these ideologies of, shit, there's a lot of people killing each other, maybe we should make up a cloud man that says that's bad. So I think it was a way of, I think, Aleks, I get what you're saying, a way of trying to rope people into certain moralistic behaviors, but in that humans are fallible, so too would be the lessons taught in any man-made religion, right?
Did you see or listen to the Book of Mormon? Trey Parker and Matt Stone's musical?
No, I haven't.
It's really spot on about this, because what it does, it describes sort of, it ends up becoming a different branch of Mormonism, what they end up with in Africa. And it's really good-hearted people that change the story of the religion and change the narrative of the religion to suit a specific situation, in order to stop war and be moral in a certain context, like in a certain society. And I think that's more what happened. I think there were good people in the different villages across Europe that despite of all the atrocities that the Bible told them to do, they found ways of interpreting the Bible to be good, it, despite the Bible. Like not because of it, but like they were good people, even though they had this evil book.
I would just change the book. I would just change the word Bible to church there, because I think the
Okay,
church was the one that was doing more of the telling, than the Bible. Because I think the Bible itself is still, I think you can see the thought, at least.
Well,
again, I'm not saying all of it. I think some of it.
What I like here is that we're going down a route of interpretation, of a route of interpreting the morals that are put forth by, and again, it can be applied to religion and to nation states, because the weak points of both those institutions is the interpretation of those enacting them. So you see a religion, and where maybe somebody who initialized that religion had a certain intent that was altruistic, somebody interpreting it later can use that to their own advantage to disenfranchise others. And the same is true of in nation states and even democracy. It can be interpreted certain ways and used to disenfranchise and harm other people. And when we get to a system, again, software-based system like Bitcoin, there is no interpretation. It's just what's there, what is there. And so you get to this absolute truth where interpretation becomes to your own detriment if you're not interpreting it right.
Yeah, to that point, I'm still taking the extremist view here, because I don't think that you're talking about people interpreting the Bible in different ways, and therefore they commit atrocious things. But I think the text as it is kind of horrible, especially the Old Testament. There are no morals. There are no morals to be found there. If you read the Bible, I've read passages from the book here and there. I haven't read all of it by far, but like everything I've read in the Old Testament so far is just horrible. There's nothing moral to be found there. There's nothing moral to be found there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say that in terms of I guess the actual morals, and again, I guess morals as we've seen can be interpreted a lot of different ways, but yeah, absolutely, like there's horrible things in the Bible. I would say there are some good lessons as well, but it
yeah, but they're in a minority.
sure, yeah. But yeah, whatever. But yeah, absolutely, like that you can look to the text and find good and bad things. And is Aleks back? I think we had some issues.
Aleks, are you there?
Yeah, sorry, I'm back. Yeah, thing died.
Welcome back.
So yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So hold on. Let me. Is it recording still? It looks like it's still recording. All right.
Yeah.
You continue, man.
Yeah, so I mean, Knut was talking about how the entirety of the Bible was horrible, and
most of it. I'm saying there might be a lesson here and there, but you have to cherry pick a lot, because most of it is just horrible.
Yeah, well, so you were pointing to the idea of that the intent, the initial intent may not have been good, because there's terrible things in there as well.
Yeah, there's a vengeful God who sacrifices his own son. Where there's nothing moral in the story about Jesus even. A guy claiming that he's the son of God, and then that God sacrificing him. Where's the you have to
come on, man. You can look
mental
look
gymnastics to find morality in that. I think it's a horrible story.
No. There is, look, I'll push back against that. There is definitely there is some important values and morals, like I said earlier, the idea of sacrifice is fundamental to how human beings need to operate, and the idea of
Self-sacrifice, I think you're.
Yeah, can I tell you a story connected to this? I saw
sure.
the American graveyard in Normandy once, and that had a profound impact on me, because seeing this mass grave for all the soldiers, or the American soldiers, and then we went and looked at the German graveyard. You know, of course, the stones were much smaller there, and it was not as big and well funded as the American one. But when you got into the graveyard, there's a small piece of French land that is American. There's a little piece of America in France, so you have to go through one of those like when you're at the airport, where they scan you and x-ray you and whatever they do, and make sure that you don't bring anything illegal in. So that was kind of funny to begin with, to walk through this airlock type of thing, to see the land of the free and the ones who liberated Europe. You have to go through sort of a police statey thing, and then there's like thousands of crosses, and here and there a Jewish star, were all the soldiers that died in the invasion of Normandy. And what are these crosses? They're literally a tool for torture. Like, crucifixion was a way to torture people to death, and that's the symbol. And this supposed God and the Almighty Father has supposedly killed his own son, tortured him to death in order to prove some vague point that is really hard to wrap your head around. And every nation state in the West, or most of them, have this tool for torture on their flags and everywhere. We're supposed to be reminded that if you don't do what we say, and if you don't do whatever we think is right and what the morals are according to us, you will be tortured to death. That's the basic. That's what's given to us visually every time about. And I have such a hard time finding anything good in religion. I think it's just a very vicious way of controlling people.
So you're I think that the how do I want to put this? Yeah, I think that what you're talking about is in a way correct. I would say that the Old Testament is more of you will be tortured to death or killed for subverting, and the New Testament is more of a look how guilty you should feel because you're all born with original sin.
Yeah,
you should feel eternally bad for me having to murder my own son, kind of thing.
Which is horrible. It's nothing moral about it. It's just horrible. And if you look at the 10 Commandments, the first 2 are literally, you should not have any other gods than me. That's like, shut up. This is it. Don't think for yourself. Fuck you. I'm in charge. That's what it says. That's the 2 most important ones. Like, I
think with the Old and New Testament, all that you're seeing is iterations of getting people to do what they're told.
Exactly.
Right? First was force, and second was guilt.
It's a MacGuffin for controlling people, a talisman for like, looky here, do what I say.
Yeah. And whether or not what the, again, like I look back to the idea that some of the ideas there, don't kill people, not a bad idea to share around, but some of the lessons were bad, some of the lessons were good, but again, the books themselves were a mechanism through which to get people to act a certain way.
Yeah, but don't kill people and don't take people's stuff should sort of be sort of, to a thinking person, those 2 are sort of obvious. And if you need a book to tell you those 2, I wouldn't want to interact with you anyway. Like, you're dangerous in that case.
But it's not knowing that those things are immoral. It's the consequence of doing them. Because before, people were looking at it as, I can get away with this.
No, I don't believe they did. I was like, making up another consequence that you need another motivation not to kill people. That's just horrible.
No, not really, because I don't think you didn't have the same you know, look, it's easy for us to assume, you know, what would have been an easier way to do it back then. But I think it is actually a functionally useful metaphor to say that you will, you know, be in eternal hell if you go and kill people, or if you go and, you know, rape people, or if you go and do X, Y, Z, that are things that are morally bad. And if you can have people, you know, believe that there is an afterlife where they'll have more pain for doing those things, you know, it's it may have been a useful tool at the time, particularly when things like this kind of philosophical discourse didn't exist, or, you know, the level of economic primitives that we have today, and, you know, raw capitalism, etc. Like like it was, we have to remember, like, you know, human evolution is messy. And I actually think, despite like the nation state, for example, being an aberration of evolution, like if we look at evolution as this sort of this period of like growing up and to the right, much like the Bitcoin chart, but it doesn't happen in a straight line, right? Nothing happens in a straight line. Life itself is irregular. I would look at the institutionalization of the church and the, you know, the institutionalization of the nation state being actually net negatives. In the beginning, they may have been net positives by helping sort of, you know, help us emerge from a little bit of, you know, chaos into some sort of order. But then they became these overarching orders that then, you know, drew us back. But I think they're part of the, you know, the, call it the blindness of evolution, is that we are, you know, we're literally figuring this shit out as we go. We don't have a playbook.
But,
you know, there is no God telling us how it should be done.
We're swapping
sorry.
So, yeah, I think we're swapping consequences and rewards for bad behavior that hurt or hinder other people, right? So, like, again, like, Old and New Testament to me are the consequence is eternal damnation versus like being shamed and being guilty for the eternal damnation, or not eternal damnation, but the torture and murder of God's only son. And then we shifted to nation states jailing, executions, so on and so forth, more in the same vein. I think we're trying to get to a place where we reduce the instances of violence or the rewards of violence by making the consequences of those also less violent. Like in a Bitcoin world, potentially the consequences of being jettisoned from a citadel may be more than enough to prevent somebody from committing murder to get a few extra sats. So, you know, like I think we're just iterating and trying to find ways to have the least violence prevalent in our societies. And previously those solutions have been much more violent than hopefully we're leaning towards.
Yeah. I think there's another missing piece of the historical perspective here, and that's like we're talking about religion preceding nation states, and that these two were the driving forces in organizing people and making humanity or civilizations more civilized, and that these were the main forces. But I think we're missing technological revolutions.
Yeah,
like
I never said that. I never said that. I actually think technology and capitalism and human action towards a better state is actually the undercurrent that has always driven evolution.
Yeah.
I think these institutions of order and these things are just, these are messy parts of it. Where in some ways, particularly in the early times when it was bottom up, were probably useful, but when they became top down, were negative.
I'm not sure that they ever were bottom up. I'm not sure that they ever were bottom up. I think there were tools in order to manipulate people to begin with, and that was their main purpose. Like inventing, like I said before, like inventing ceremonial burial made it easier for the despot to tell these 18-year-olds to go and kill the other tribe. So I think that, like, what actually propelled humanity forward was like the roads were getting better, wheels were getting better. We found easier ways of starting fires. We found ways to irrigate the land to make the crops grow faster. Stuff like that had a much larger impact on civilization, I believe. And I'm a firm believer in that religions and nation states have mainly just hindered our progress rather than helped it in any way, really.
But by and large, I 80% agree with you, but I just don't think you can. It's one of those things where you can't discount 100% of it. So, and this is where, like, you know, I'm reading a book now by I think his name is Vasil Vaclav or something like that, but it's Energy and Civilization, and it is really good because it really talks to that point. Like, all these people who think that you know, America rose because of slavery and all, it's such bullshit, because it was, you know, evolution and capitalism and progress are all a function of the actual better, more efficient and more effective use and extraction and use of energy. Simple as that. And what allowed America and places like that to dominate were that they actually were able to harness things like water energy, like through you know,
aqueducts.
what was the whether it was aqueducts and with like the turning thing, like where the water sort of
water wheels,
water wheels. That's it, water wheels, and then
turbines,
windmills, and then turbines, and all of that sort of stuff is actually what put Western society ahead.
Exactly.
Not necessarily religion and the nation state.
No.
But what I must concede there is always a bottom up. There's never only a top down. So the bottom up always exists. And when you look at the bottom up in a religious context, you have families who sort of grow up with these belief systems that, you know, maybe not all of them are great. You know, some of them might be just blindly dogmatic, but a lot of them are good. And you have like good, you know, family structure where, you know, people look after each other, and there's a cohesive nuclear family and an extended family and things like that. So that bottom up idea of teaching, you know, like good principles, good values, work ethic, and things like that. That's why you sort of I don't see anything wrong with circumcision. I mean, look, there may be, like, you know, weird dogmatic things, like I said, but there is also cohesion and what do you call it? Like good values that are taught from a bottom up basis. And, you know, like the Mormons, the Quakers, there's innumerable examples of this stuff. And again, with it sort of emerged. Again, we have to remember how, like, Christianity emerged, and in the environment that it emerged, it was, you know, it was contrary to the prevailing you know, emperor or empire at the time. And so I think,
do you think Christianity is more truthful? But this is a sort of a weird question, but do you think Christianity is more truthful than Mormonism?
In what sense, though?
Yeah, exactly. You can't really you have to frame it somehow, so it's a bit of a weird thing. I think because I think they stem from the same thing, like someone either deliberately or not trying to fool someone else. That's like the basic premise.
True. Yeah, it's a look. I think it's a tough one. I've kind of by default taken the position here, sort of, you know, not for religion, but just trying to take a more
I like it. I like it. Taking the devil's advocate position is really good, because otherwise we have no discussion. So I like it a lot.
Yeah,
I appreciate that, man. Yeah.
Okay, I know Ben doesn't have too much time, so I've got a couple things here that I wanted to. Man, I've got so much actually more that I want to hit on, but
yeah, we have to do that again.
Maybe two things. If we assume that, okay, religion's bullshit, and, you know, high degree of you know, there's no white bearded man up in the sky, you know, running things and all this sort of stuff. Where does, and this is sort of left of field, is, are we living in a simulation? Where does the idea of a simulation sort of come into this whole thing? And, you know, what do you guys think about that as a potential position of reality?
You're
No one
muted,
wants
Ben.
to go first.
Sorry. I like the idea that if we're in a simulation, Bitcoin potentially breaks it because hash power gets too great for,
Yeah, that's in
for
my
the
that's in my book. It's not my idea
Yeah.
from the beginning, but I put it in the book because I liked it so much that eventually
Yeah.
proof of
That's
work
fucking
will
awesome.
slow down the simulation. The question is, can the people living in the simulation experience that? Because does it affect the flow of time? Like I love these thoughts.
Yeah, do we start to glitch out? Do we start
Yeah.
everything's frozen? You
Yeah,
start to see the
yeah,
matrix because
that's
the
your
system's
internet
running.
yeah.
You're running low on RAM.
Yeah, it's Alek's internet connection is like that. It's probably proof of work slowing down the
This-
matrix.
Basically, this is it. God
proof of
has
simulation.
arrived.
I think
During our atheist discussion.
on simulation theory, I think it's a very interesting theory because like I follow the logic in it. Like when we can make computer games in virtual reality that are basically as good looking as reality is, it's not a huge mental leap to think that we are living in a simulation, and we might be living in a simulation in a simulation in a simulation in a simulation. There's like no end to that, but it's a little bit like thinking about infinity. It will always be abstract, and we will never know these things. Uh, I tend to think that studying reality as it appears is more productive than focusing on stuff we cannot know. And that's like when we talk about I often get the argument two arguments I get from religious people about the existence of some sort of divine being. And one is if the universe is as fine-tuned as it is for our existence to happen, that's proof of a creator. And I think that is flawed thinking, because I think if the universe wasn't the way it is, we wouldn't be able to experience it at all, because we wouldn't exist. So it had to be this way. The fluke is not a fluke, because we wouldn't be here to experience it if it didn't turn out the way it did. And the other thing is like with quantum entanglement. Did you hear about this concept that the smallest particles can be entangled, two of them, so regardless of how far apart they are, they behave in the same way, and they could theoretically be in another galaxy and still be connected somehow. But that's like trying to imagine higher dimensions. There's this is in a lot of movies. If you imagine a flatlander living in a 2D world, the fastest point between point A and point B is like a straight line like this. But there's actually a faster way, and it's if you fold it to the third dimension, you can go straight through the paper and come instantly to the other side. And I think something like that in a higher dimension, whatever that means, might be why there is quantum entanglement. There's a shortcut somehow in a dimension that we can't experience. And some like string theory points to this, and the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics points to this. This might be it. I think these thoughts are more interesting than doing the huge mental leap of somehow someone must be designing the entire thing, and somehow someone must be pulling strings, because it's not really necessary. All you need is a bit more imagination, and you can easily, like, maybe not visualize what another dimension looked like, or what a multiverse really would look like, or but it's, I think, more productive to think about things in from a what might actually be true perspective than just guessing. And yeah, I don't really know what my point was with this. What was the question again, Aleks? Yeah.
Hold on, let me unmute myself. So I'm going to apologize for any echo because my earphones keep dying. But I guess the question was, if the idea of if we're in a simulation or something like that, does that presuppose that some sort of deity does exist, or that a higher power and all that sort of stuff does exist? Like, because they're all sort of, it's almost an entangled question. Because like if we are in a simulation, who's running the simulation, etc. So it's like it's a very, I don't know, it's an interesting tangent.
I guess the answer is we have to be like with the notion of free will. We have to act as if we have it, and the same thing goes for the simulation. We have to act or view the world as if we're not living in a simulation, because we can never figure out if we can't point out the flaws in reality. So we have to study reality first. Always come from a reality perspective when you think about these things. So
yeah, and I guess Alex, to your question regarding does it presuppose the notion of a deity or somebody pulling the strings? Sure. Like if we were in a simulation, then obviously somebody would have had to have created it. But then it kind of gets back to our earlier point about consciousness and levels of consciousness and the difference between a human being and an animal, and then where are we on that spectrum of, okay, well, if somebody above us created a simulation, then who might have created their simulation? And again, the simulations within simulations. And I again, you could think yourself in circles around this kind of stuff. Until Bitcoin breaks the simulation, I don't see much point in thinking yourself in circles around this, other than like just fun conversation.
Having said all that, I do recommend rewatching the first Matrix movie. It's really good.
Oh yeah, yeah, exactly.
I'm the host now. Oh, yeah, there you are,
Alex is
okay.
here.
I'm back.
It's still recording. It's still recording. Don't worry.
All right.
Basically,
we need to round this off anyway, right?
Yeah.
We do. There's one piece I want to round it off with. So Benny, I didn't hear what you said, but I'm assuming it's been recorded, so everyone else is going to hear it. That's great. was there anything in there that you wanted me to answer by any chance, like that you want to repeat, or should we just making a statement for the audience?
Yeah, I basically just kind of made a statement on my thoughts around around if there is a simulation, then what does that do about the levels of consciousness in humans? But yeah, besides the point.
Okay, cool. All right, so let's wrap this up with one final piece that I wanted to hit on. Like this may have the tendency to go down a rabbit hole, but let's hope it doesn't, because we're not going to end up doing a 5-hour fucking podcast here. So connectedness. So have either of you guys ever had like the experience of, I don't know, like knowing that someone was going to call and picking up the phone just beforehand, or knowing that someone was there, or just like some sort of connectedness with someone else,
deja vu,
or like could be deja vu, but just some sort of, call it an extrasensory experience or something. Well, I think connectedness is the best word for it. It's like, feeling like like a oneness or something, like a connection, call it to a higher power or whatever. Like, have you guys had that kind of experience before?
Yeah, like I said before, when I've experienced it a few times, like quite a lot of times, really, like you feel like you're channeling something when you like play music or write or have really good sex, or that's like, or even like sailing can do that, or whatever other activity where you have to be completely aware and completely present. I guess present, like
mushrooms.
Mushrooms. When people drive those Grand Prix Formula One cars, I think they're in that zone all the time. So I think that's why
tennis is another example. Yeah,
Yeah,
tennis is another example.
yeah.
You have to actually start moving before the ball is even hit by the opponent.
Yeah.
So like that's
But
there's a whole book, Flow by Csikszentmihalyi, on that one. But
yeah,
anyway,
flow. I am a firm believer that our subconscious is in ways much more reliable than our conscious mind, and that you should try to find those flow states, and you should go with your instinct a lot more when it comes to physical activity, at least. Well, when it comes to pure logic thinking and like trying to wrap your head around abstract concept, I'd like to quote Carl Sagan and say I prefer not to think with my gut, because some things you have to think through and like come to like see beyond your own biases, because but a state of flow, I think, is what makes the squirrel run so fast up and down the trees. And like we should try to be there as much as possible, like to live each moment to the fullest. It's about that. But I don't believe I'm connected to a higher power or anything like that. I think it's in my brain.
Okay, so do you think so? You're talking about flow on an individual basis. Have you felt that connectedness, though, that flow, like with someone else or someone somewhere else or anything like that? Yeah,
playing music, definitely. When you're in a band and you find that's what you're searching for when you start a band and you try to do music seriously. You try to find those moments where you have sort of it feels like you're one consciousness, the people in the group playing the thing, when you really can do it without thinking. When you can really enjoy, you don't have to think about where to put your fingers or what to sing next or whatever. You just do it, and you live it, and that's a beautiful thing. And I'd like to have more time to do it more in my life, but having a family and a job and everything, it's hard to find the time to play more. I have this with my brothers. We've been playing guitar together since we were kids, so we can really get into jams that is definitely a connectedness there. Did you hear about mirror neurons? They found in
twins?
when monitor, not only with twins but with chimpanzees as well, when they monitor the brain of an individual watching another individual do something, and you can see the same neurons firing up in both brains. So there is sort of a connectedness to people that can see each other, at least.
Yeah, seeing is one thing. That there's also the stuff about the twins, like, you know, being in different places, not even seeing each other, but, you know, having similar experiences, and, you know, knowing that something's happened to the other one and stuff like that. Before I blabber on, though, Ben, what's your sort of position, experience, thoughts on this?
I've definitely felt like I've had experiences like that where you feel like, oh, something is wrong with somebody, and you give them a call and they're like, wow, how did you know to call? How did you know that something had happened? Or and I mean, I think I've got a bucket list, and one of the things on my bucket list is actually to experience something that I cannot explain. I think we all hope to have that kind of experience where something greater than yourself, you almost kind of want that type of thing, in that you know that there's something beyond just your experience. However, most of the I lean towards either it's coincidence or it's something that can be explained by science but has not yet been explained by science. I've become a lot more of a cynic as I go on, and I'm less likely to lean towards the spiritual explanation of it. Whereas, the ideas of stuff like quantum entanglement, things like that, can actually play out and affect us, and those moments may or may not be a symptom of that. But to answer your question, I felt like I've had those experiences, but there's literally no way to quantify it with our existing technology.
Yeah, I think
Exactly.
the coincidence is an interesting one, because like I've got a saying when people tell me, oh, things happen for a reason, and I don't like, when I was younger I kind of was more in that camp, but these days I say things happen and we give them a reason, because I think it's more of a retrospective, or the only truth I find in things happen for a reason is more the action reaction consequential type nature of it, which is I got hit by a car because I stepped in front of the car. So yeah, things do happen for a reason, pal. So it's like, so there's the real version of it, which is the literal, or there's, what I think is things happen and we sort of retrospectively find meaning and reason for them. So that's my note on the coincidence thing. But like I've had some experiences in my life, like real like premonitions and shit like that, where I've dreamt something and then a day or two later the fucking thing has actually occurred in relatively high definition. And my uncle was really interesting with that. Like twice, he's had stories twice. One of them I actually experienced myself. Was he fucking had a dream about someone passing away, and 3 days later it happened. It was like really fucking wild.
But that might be also the brain is really good at like making these things up. Like memory, for instance, is not what we think it is, and like the phenomenon of deja vu is just that. You think that you have a long-term memory of dreaming a thing or experiencing a thing before, but you really don't. It's just a memory sitting in the wrong hard drive, so to speak, in the brain. So it's just a glitch in your your memory
I guess that's
system.
one way to explain it.
The thing is, I don't think you need anything metaphysical to explain stuff like this. I'm with Ben there, that there is a natural explanation for all of it, and people tend to try to find the supernatural explanation. Oh, I saw a ghost or whatever it might be, and I think that's lazy is the word I would use to come up with that, and not trying to figure out what happened is the lazy way to go. And like I don't think there are metaphysical things happening.
Yeah.
As I said, the reality is interesting enough as it is. You don't need the metaphysical side, like mirror neurons, for instance, and quantum entanglement, and the ever increasing acceleration of the expansion of outer space. Like the universe gets bigger and bigger because there's more and more nothing. Try to wrap your head around that. I can't. And the concept of infinity. These are all things that can be discussed within reality, and they're absolutely interesting enough for me to be satisfied at not having to come up with ghost stories or like I saw this in a dream and I'm like, I don't need that.
Yeah.
Gents, I lost you there for a bit. It seems like the god of the internet is giving us a sign that we should stop trying to fuck with the simulation.
It's an omen.
It's an omen, that's right. Look, I think for me, I'm in the spirit of rounding this up. We may actually need to do a like, if you guys would like to do a part 2, maybe we should do a part 2, because I think there was a bunch of other things that I wanted to dig into.
Love to.
Yeah, I think the idea of connectedness and this sort of this fabric of supra consciousness that we sort of we're connected in some way, is kind of maybe the closest definition I have to the idea of a god, without getting all hippie spiritual in fucking nature, like because I really I don't like that, like I said, this whole things happen for a reason, determinism, spiritualism, we're all one kumbaya shit. Like, I'm a bit individualist by nature. And I really think the individual is, again, the locus of all things, but there seems to be something for me there with this like connectedness of beings of our species, and maybe broader, more broadly speaking, to nature in general. And for me, where I am at this stage in my life of my journey of being an atheist is I'm definitely an atheist in the sense of, religious doctrines. I don't agree with them. I think they're pointless, outdated institutions. I will give credit where credit's due on things like religious texts and the essence of some of the stories. I think are great. I think some of them are stupid, but I definitely think some of them are very useful. But I do think that there is. I'm not sold either way on whether or not there's some sort of supra consciousness or some sort of connectedness that transcends what exactly we experience in in the dimensions within which we physically live, and the five senses that we experience. So yeah, that would be an interesting one to dig into. So that's kind of my final thoughts. I'll throw some final thoughts, and you boys give me your final thoughts of this, and let's wrap this baby up.
Sure. I'll just quickly dive in again. I just see us going through this gradual transition of ways of communicating and ways of determining the best courses of action for the best outcomes for everyone. The most efficient uses of human time and human capital are gradually being sought out and making us better for having figured those things out. And I think the transition from, just the craziness of the early, we'll say, what's the word I'm looking for? Even like the Neanderthals and everything, just foraging and figuring out things on their own, and then the evolution of things like the church and the nation state, gradually decaying to where we are hopefully now headed into a more software and meritocracy based society. And I think it's just a natural evolution of communication.
Cool.
Yeah.
Final words?
I don't know if I have any final words about the topics we've discussed. I'm very happy to discuss something other than Bitcoin. We didn't talk a lot about Bitcoin. We've mostly been talking about other stuff, and I find that refreshing. I'd like to thank you for putting this together, Aleks. Really, really good to do this, and not being hindered by time, like just going on to talk about stuff. Always a pleasure, Ben, as well. So thank you for doing this, and I'd love to do it again sometime, and maybe battle Robert or Gigi the next time. I don't know.
yeah. I think we need to have I think a discussion like that. I think I was channeling the inner Breedlove and Gigi. I think we it's funny. I find myself in all sorts of camps, and that's why I sort of wanted to do this. And then I remember when you said on Twitter, I was like, oh fuck, I've got to prioritize this one, because I've got a few kind of specials like this that I want to do, like discussions that are peripheral to Bitcoin but sort of involve it. And it's a real pleasure to do this.
But I find myself in the between people's opinions and theories as well, and I love these discussions when you can, because there's so many clever people in this space, and we enter the space from so many different angles. Like the bunch of books that Robert read, for instance, are completely different from what I read, and we still come to the same conclusions about the money being the problem, and like how do we solve it, and seeing this thing for what it is, and seeing how large of how much change it will that will be the result of Bitcoin in the long run, and being so bullish. I mean, we come from so many different backgrounds and different ideas, but we still end up at the same. We converge
converging on truth. This is, I
Yeah.
mean, we didn't get to spend any time on discussing truth,
No.
and so I'll save that for the next one. But yeah,
Yeah.
like
we should spend more time on that, and like
yeah.
the probabilistic truth. I mean, do you know, for instance, how many minutes there are on average there are left right now to the next block comes?
Not off the top of my head, no.
It's always 10
Wait,
minutes.
hold on. But it's okay. Yeah, sorry.
It's never anything else than 10 minutes. And this is a hard one to wrap your hand around. It's always an average of 10 minutes, regardless if 10 minutes have already passed or not.
Yeah, touche. Okay. All right, gents, where can people find you quickly? Let's wrap this up. Knut, where can people find you?
They can find me on Twitter at Knut Svanholm. You can find my books on Amazon, and you can DM me on Twitter if you want to buy them for Bitcoin, or connect in any other way. I'm open to anything. If you want to dance or whatever you want to do. Most of my Bitcoin stuff is on Twitter, and I write for. I can recommend this magazine as well, Citadel 21, where all the Bitcoin plebs write their philosophical stuff. It's really good, that's basically it. And look up the everything divided by 21 million video that we did the other day. Really proud of that one.
Brilliant. Benny?
Awesome. Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at BTC Sessions. And then you can also find me on YouTube. So if you're looking for tutorials on most things Bitcoin, when it comes to nodes or multisig or CoinJoin or even the basics, and news and interviews and all that kind of good stuff, you can just search BTC Sessions on YouTube, and yeah, you'll find me there.
Awesome. Gentlemen, thank you very much. To the audience, if you're listening to this, you obviously know where to find me, and if you listen to this, you can just follow the breadcrumbs. But yeah, I want to thank both these gentlemen. I think we've smashed over 3 hours, which is
fantastic.
Been a monster of a discussion. This is the longest so far. This is exactly the kind of style that I wanted to do with these series of discussions. So really, thank you both for taking the time out for this. And yeah, enjoy the rest of your night. Thank you again. I'll be putting this together and hopefully publishing it in the next few days. So
awesome.
Thanks a lot, Aleks.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
Super.
All right, that was a monster of a episode 3 of the Hall of Fame series of the Wake Up Podcast. Thank you to Ben and to Knut for coming on this call. We had a brilliant conversation, and I hope you guys all enjoyed it. I think this one also merits or warrants a part 2, which we'll look to do probably early next year. As usual, subscribe, whether on YouTube or any of the other podcast channels that you're on, and keep an eye out for the new episodes that are coming out. Thanks again for all your support. See you on the next episode.